On Christmas Eve, my father stood less than 6 feet away when my stepmother slapped me hard enough to send me crashing into the kitchen cabinet. He saw everything. The room fell silent, save for the Christmas carol playing in the background. I truly thought no one cared. However, 3 days later, my grandfather called a family meeting and brought evidence that made my stepmother turn whiter than the snow falling outside the window. My name is Elena Marshall. I am 29 years old, and on most days, I like to think I am a woman who has her life together. I live in a sunlight-drenched apartment on the 16th floor of a building in downtown Denver, Colorado, overlooking the Rockies. I pay my own rent, drive a car I bought with my own money, and work as the content lead at Skyline Storyworks, a boutique marketing firm where I manage campaigns for tech startups and organic food brands. At work, I am known for my spine. I negotiate contracts, I push back on unreasonable deadlines, and I have a reputation for being the person who can calmly navigate a PR crisis without breaking a sweat. My colleagues see a professional, independent woman who knows her worth. But the moment I pull into the driveway of my father's house in Maple Ridge Estates, that version of Elena Marshall dissolves like sugar in hot tea. To understand why I stood frozen in a kitchen while my cheek burned on Christmas Eve, you have to understand the architecture of my family. It is a structure built on silence and well-polished surfaces. My biological mother passed away from ovarian cancer when I was 15 years old. She was the warmth in our home, the kind of woman who made soup from scratch and remembered the names of the grocery store clerks. When she died, the house went cold. My father, David Marshall, was a man who did not know how to exist in a cold house. He was not cruel, but he was weak in the way that many men of his generation are weak. He needed a woman to function, to tell him where his socks were, to schedule his dental appointments, to make him feel like a king in his own castle. 3 years after Mom died, he found Veronica. Veronica was, and remains, a force of nature. She is a high-end real estate agent who specializes in selling multi-million-dollar homes to people who have more money than taste. She is beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way, Botox just enough to look rested, not frozen, with blonde highlights that cost $400 every 6 weeks. She swept into our lives with an energy that felt like a rescue mission. She redecorated the living room, threw out my mother's old throw pillows, and filled the silence with chatter about square footage and school districts. She also came with baggage, though she packaged it as a bonus. Veronica had 2 children from a previous marriage that she rarely spoke about. Brianna was 12 then, and Caleb was 7. Today, Brianna is 15, the same age I was when I lost my mother, and Caleb is 10. They are good kids. I want to make that clear. They are not the wicked step-siblings from a fairy tale. They are anxious, polite, and perpetually terrified of disappointing their mother. Veronica does not beat them. She does not starve them. Instead, she curates them. To Veronica, Brianna and Caleb are not children. They are extensions of her brand, accessories that need to be dressed in Ralph Lauren and positioned correctly in family photos to prove that she is a successful modern matriarch. And then there was me. I was 18 when they got married, just about to leave for college. I was too old to be adopted, too old to be molded, and too reminiscent of the wife David Marshall had buried. So, Veronica found a different use for me. I became the grease in the gears of her perfect life. I became the help. It started subtly, a request to pick up dry cleaning because she was showing a house, a text asking if I could grab Caleb from soccer practice because she was stuck in traffic. Then it became the default setting of our relationship. Over the last decade, I have transitioned from daughter to unpaid logistics manager. I remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago vividly. It was the moment I realized my role had become permanent. Veronica had invited 20 people, clients, neighbors, and a few distant relatives she wanted to impress. She had spent weeks talking about the menu, posting photos of organic turkeys and artisanal cranberry sauce on her Instagram with captions about the joy of nourishment. But on Thanksgiving morning, the house was silent. Veronica had a migraine, Or perhaps she just didn't want to touch raw meat. I had driven over the night before to help prep, sleeping in my old room, which had been converted into a guest office. At 5 in the morning, I was the one standing in the kitchen, wrestling a 20-pound bird into the roasting pan. I was the one peeling 10 pounds of potatoes until my hands cramped. I was the one monitoring the oven temperature and basting the turkey every 30 minutes while the rest of the house slept. When Veronica finally descended the stairs at 11 o'clock, she was wearing a silk robe and holding a mimosa. She looked fresh, rested, and radiant. "Oh, Elena," she said, glancing at the flour on my apron and the sweat on my forehead. "You are such a lifesaver. I don't know what I would do without you." She didn't offer to help chop the vegetables. She went into the living room to arrange fresh flowers, because that was the visible work. When dinner was served at 4 in the afternoon, the guests gushed. "Veronica, this turkey is divine," a neighbor said. "How do you find the time with your busy schedule?" Veronica smiled, a humble, practiced tilt of her head. "Oh, you know me. I believe family is worth the effort. Elena helped with the sides. Didn't you, sweetie?" Helped. I had cooked the entire meal, but I sat there, exhausted, smelling like sage and onion, and nodded. "Yes," I said. "I helped." My father sat at the head of the table, carving the bird I had cooked. He caught my eye for a second, a flicker of apology in his gaze, before he looked away and raised his glass to toast his wonderful wife. That was the pattern. The guests at Maple Ridge Estates, the lawyers, the doctors, the other real estate agents, they all knew me. They called me Elena the Useful. "Ask Elena. She knows where the ice is." "Elena can drive you to the airport." "Elena won't mind watching the kids while we go to the wine tasting." It wasn't just the labor, it was the erasure. Last year, for Brianna's 14th birthday, Veronica threw a winter wonderland party that must have cost $5,000. There was a DJ, a chocolate fountain, and a professional photographer. While the party raged upstairs, I spent 3 hours in the unfinished basement, wrapping 40 gifts that Veronica had bought online but hadn't bothered to unbox. I sat on a cold concrete floor, surrounded by rolls of silver paper and satin ribbons, taping boxes while the bass of the music thumped through the ceiling. I could hear them laughing. I could hear Veronica on the microphone making a speech about how proud she was of her daughter. When I finally came upstairs with the armful of gifts, perfectly wrapped, Veronica frowned at me. "You took a long time, Elena. The cake is already cut. Try to smile, please. You look so sour." I looked at my father. He was standing by the fireplace, holding a scotch. He saw the paper cuts on my fingers. He saw the way my shoulders slumped. "Dad," I had whispered to him later, while I was washing the champagne flutes, because the catering staff had left early, "I can't keep doing this. I have a job. I have a life." He sighed, the sound of a man who just wanted the boat to stop rocking. "I know, Elle. I know she can be demanding, but she's under a lot of pressure with the market right now, and it makes her happy to have things a certain way. Just bear with it for one day, okay? For me? Just bear with it." That was his mantra. He traded my dignity for his peace of mind. He let his wife treat his daughter like a servant because it was easier than having an argument. I think, deep down, that hurt more than Veronica's entitlement. I expected Veronica to be selfish. She was a narcissist who viewed people as resources. But my father? He was supposed to be my protector. Every time he looked away, every time he let her snap her fingers at me, he was breaking a promise he made the day I was born. There was only one person in the Marshall family who seemed to see the play for what it was. My grandfather, Walter Marshall. Walter is 78 years old, a man carved out of granite and old-school work ethic. He founded Marshall Ridge Holdings 40 years ago, starting with a single pickup truck and a toolbox, and built it into one of the largest construction and development firms in Colorado. He lives alone in a massive log cabin up in Evergreen, about 40 minutes into the mountains. It is a house that smells of pine wood and expensive scotch. Grandpa Walter is intimidating, He has bushy gray eyebrows that knit together like storm clouds and a voice that sounds like gravel crunching under tires. He retired 5 years ago, handing the day-to-day operations of the company over to a board of directors. Though my father serves as a VP, Walter tolerates Veronica, but he has never liked her. He is polite to her in the way a wolf is polite to a fox. He watches her. I remember a Sunday afternoon about 6 months ago. I had driven up to Evergreen to help Grandpa organize his home office, not because Veronica ordered me to, but because I wanted to. I loved being around him. The air was cleaner up there. We were sorting through old blueprints when his phone rang. It was Veronica. I could hear her shrill voice through the receiver, even though it wasn't on speaker. She was looking for me. She wanted to know why I wasn't at her house yet to help prep for a barbecue I hadn't even agreed to attend. Grandpa listened for a moment, his face darkening. "Elena is with me," he barked into the phone. "She is not your personal assistant. Veronica, she will leave when she is finished here." He hung up without saying goodbye. The silence that followed was heavy. He turned his swivel chair to face me. His eyes, a piercing steel blue that I had inherited, bore into mine. "You let her run you ragged," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It's easier than fighting, Grandpa," I said, looking down at a roll of blueprints. Dad needs peace." "David needs a spine," Grandpa grunted. He leaned forward, resting his heavy hands on his mahogany desk. "Listen to me. Elena, you are a marshal. You are my granddaughter. I built an empire so that my family wouldn't have to bow to anyone. I don't like the way she looks at you. I don't like how she orders you around like you are on her payroll." "She's family," I said weaky. "Family treats you with respect," he countered. "People treat you how you teach them to treat you. Right now, you are teaching Veronica that you are a doormat, and you are teaching your father that his cowardice is acceptable." He reached out and tapped my hand. His skin was rough, calloused from years of manual labor before he became a CEO. "One day, Elena," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble, "one day, she is going to push too hard. And on that day, you have to learn to say no, not maybe, not I'll try, just no. It is the most powerful word in the English language." I nodded, thinking it was just advice. I didn't know then that he was giving me an instruction. I didn't know that he was watching more closely than any of us realized. I didn't know that the day he spoke of was barreling toward me like a freight train, scheduled to arrive on the 24th of December. But back then, I just squeezed his hand and went back to sorting papers. I drove down the mountain that evening and went straight to Veronica's house to help with the barbecue, because I didn't know how to stop. I was the good daughter. I was the useful stepdaughter. I was the invisible glue holding their shiny, fragile picture together. And I had no idea that the glue was about to dry out, crack, and bring the whole house down. The week before Christmas began with a victory that felt like champagne bubbling in my veins. At Skyline Storyworks, my team and I had spent 3 months grueling over a pitch for a massive contract with a sustainable energy drink company called Vitality Flow. It was the kind of account that makes careers. We had worked 18-hour days, eaten stale takeout at our desks, and survived on caffeine and panic. But on Tuesday morning, we got the call. We had won. My boss, Marcus, called me into his office, a glass-walled box that offered a view of the snow-dusted city. He was beaming. "Elena, this is incredible work," he said, sliding a brochure across his desk toward me. "You carried this team, as a thank you, and because I know you haven't taken a vacation day in 2 years. The partners want to send you on the company retreat in January. 4 days in Miami, 5-star resort, spa treatments included, no laptops allowed." I stared at the glossy photo of a turquoise pool and palm trees. Miami. A place where the air didn't hurt my face and where no one would ask me to wrap a gift or baste a turkey. "I'm in," I said, feeling a rare smile stretch across my face. "I am absolutely in." I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in a decade. For the first time, I had a valid, professional excuse to draw a hard boundary. I was a successful woman with a high-powered career. I wasn't just David Marshall's daughter or Veronica's errand girl. I was Elena, the content lead, who just landed a $200,000 contract. But the bubble burst the moment I pulled up to the house in Maple Ridge Estates for our mandatory pre-Christmas family dinner. Veronica had been ramping up for this year's Christmas open house for months. In her mind, this wasn't just a party, it was a strategic military operation designed to cement her status as the queen of the local real estate market. The invitations had been sent out on heavy cream cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. She had invited every high-net-worth individual within a 20-mile radius. I walked into the house, and the smell of roasting garlic and expensive perfume hit me. The house was already decorated to an inch of its life. There were garlands wrapped around the banisters, 3 wreaths on the front door, and a tree in the foyer that was so perfectly symmetrical it looked artificial, though I knew it was real because she had made me drive to a tree farm an hour away to pick it out last weekend. Dinner was a performance. As always, we sat in the formal dining room. Veronica sat opposite my father, with Brianna and Caleb on the sides. I took the seat at the end, the one nearest the kitchen door, a subconscious habit I had never managed to break. Veronica was in high gear. She poured herself a glass of Chardonnay and looked around the table with a satisfied sigh. "This year is going to be spectacular," she announced, spearing a piece of asparagus. "I have accepted RSVPs from the mayor and the head of the zoning board. It is crucial that everything goes perfectly." She turned her gaze toward me. It was a look I knew well, a predatory smile masked as maternal warmth. "Speaking of which, Elena, I have a little project for you. Since you are so organized, I have decided to put you in charge of the entire logistics flow for the open house. I need you to manage the catering staff, oversee the valet parking, and ensure the coat check runs smoothly. Oh, and the ice sculptures need to be monitored so they don't drip on the hardwood." She said it casually, as if asking me to pass the salt. I put my fork down. The brochure for Miami seemed to burn in my purse under the table. This was it. The moment Grandpa Walter had told me to prepare for. "Actually, Veronica," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I can't do it this year." The silence that followed was immediate and suffocating. The only sound was the clink of Caleb's fork against his plate. Veronica froze, her glass halfway to her lips. My father looked up from his steak, his eyes widening slightly. "Excuse me?" Veronica asked, a small, tight laugh escaping her throat. "What do you mean you can't?" "I just closed a massive project at work," I explained, looking her in the eye. "I am exhausted, Veronica, and I have made plans to rest during the holidays. I will come to the party as a guest, of course, but I cannot work it. I need a break." Veronica set her glass down. The warmth evaporated from her face, replaced by the cold, hard calculation of a woman who was not used to hearing the word no. "A break?" she repeated, her voice pitching up an octave. "Elena, this is not just a party. This is for the family. This is for your father's reputation as much as mine. Do you have any idea how much stress I am under? I have been planning this for months. I thought I could count on you." I looked at my father, silently begging him to intervene. "Dad," I said, "I've been working 60-hour weeks." My father took a long sip of his red wine. He looked tired. He always looked tired when Veronica was unhappy. He set the glass down and rubbed his temple. "Elena, honey," he said, his voice pleading, "don't be difficult. You know how important this is to Veronica. She has worked herself to the bone getting the house ready." "So have I." "Dad," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, "I work too." "It is just one day," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Just one day of help. Is that so much to ask? You can rest after Christmas." It wasn't just one day. It was never just one day. It was the principle of the thing. It was the fact that my time was considered communal property, while theirs was sacred. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "but I can't. You should hire a coordinator if it's that big of a job." Veronica gasped. She looked at Brianna and Caleb, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. "I see," Veronica said, her voice dripping with venomous disappointment. I suppose I should have expected this. You have always been a little separate, haven't you, Elena? A little focused on your own world. It is fine. I suppose I will just have to stay up all night again. I hope you enjoy your rest, while the rest of us pull our weight for this family. She was good. She was so incredibly good at twisting the knife. She made reasonable boundaries sound like acts of treason. Then came the final blow. Brianna. Sweet 15-year-old Brianna, who worshipped the ground her mother walked on, looked at me with genuine sadness. But Aunt Elena, she said, using the nickname she had given me when she was a toddler, if you don't help, who is going to bake the gingerbread cookies? Mom says only you know how to make them soft in the middle. I looked at Caleb. He looked on the verge of tears. If you don't come early, you won't help me set up the train set around the tree? He asked. It was a trap, a beautifully constructed, emotional trap. Veronica knew exactly what she was doing. She was using the children as human shields. If I said no to her, I was standing up for myself. But if I said no to them, I was the Grinch who stole Christmas. I looked at my father again. He was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. He had made his choice. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose her happiness over my dignity. I felt something crumble inside me. It wasn't surrender. It was defeat. Fine, I whispered. Veronica perked up instantly, the predator who had secured its prey. I knew you would come around, she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Oh, thank goodness. I will email you the vendor list tonight. You need to call the caterer first thing in the morning. They are being difficult about the appetizers. I finished the rest of the dinner in a fog of resentment. I felt hollowed out. I had the title, the salary, and the Miami trip, but in this house, I was still just the girl who couldn't say no. On the drive back to my apartment, my phone rang over the car's Bluetooth system. The screen displayed the name, Grandpa Walter. I answered, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. Hey, Grandpa. You caved, didn't you? His voice rumbled through the speakers. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. I didn't say anything. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter. I spoke to Veronica 10 minutes ago. He continued. She was gloating. Said you volunteered to handle the logistics because you wanted to contribute. That woman could spin a tornado into a gentle breeze. I tried. Grandpa, I said, tears finally pricking my eyes. I really tried. But she used the kids. And Dad just sat there. Walter made a noise in his throat, a sound of deep disgust. Your father is a good man, Elena, but he has become a weak one. He is so afraid of losing her that he is willing to lose you. He just doesn't realize it yet. He knows I won't leave, I said bitterly. Does he? Walter asked. Or does he just assume you will always be there to take the hits? Listen to me, kid. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, especially people who don't even thank you for the heat. This Christmas, I want you to try something. What? I asked. Stop caring about the consequences, he said. Just for once. See what happens when you stop holding up the sky for them. Let it fall. He hung up before I could ask what he meant. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't a call this time. It was a notification from the family group chat, a chat that usually consisted of Veronica posting photos of her awards and my father sending thumbs-up emojis. But this message was from Walter. December 27th, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone is required to be at the lodge in Evergreen. No excuses. I have some important matters to discuss regarding the future of the Marshall family and the distribution of assets. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Distribution of assets. That was code for the will. That was code for money. Almost instantly, the chat lit up. Veronica. Oh, Walter. Of course we will be there. Is everything okay with your health? We can bring dinner. Dad. We'll be there. Dad. I looked at the message again. Grandpa Walter was up to something. He never discussed money. He believed money was something you earned, not something you talked about. For him to call a meeting like this, right after Christmas. I typed a simple reply, I'll be there. But as I lay in bed that night, dreading the upcoming party, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa wasn't planning a discussion. He was planning an ambush, and I had a sinking feeling that before we got to the 27th, something terrible was going to happen. I just didn't know that the catalyst would be a missing dessert and a slap that would echo louder than any church bell. Christmas at the Marshall household was not a holiday. It was a production. A meticulously curated, high-stakes theatrical performance where the admission price was your dignity and the reviews could destroy you. I arrived at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. The house in Maple Ridge Estates was glowing like a beacon of affluence against the dark, snowy backdrop of the Colorado winter. Every window was framed with white fairy lights, the kind that were perfectly spaced and probably installed by a professional crew. A wreath the size of a tractor tire hung on the front door, adorned with real velvet ribbons and frosted pine cones. From the driveway, I could already hear the soft, sophisticated hum of jazz music and the murmur of 50 people pretending to like each other. I parked my car down the street to leave the driveway open for the guests' Lexuses and Mercedes, then trudged through the fresh snow in my heels. I had dressed carefully for the occasion. I wore a crimson velvet dress that fell to my knees, simple but elegant, paired with the pearl earrings my mother had left me. I told myself, as I walked toward the looming oak door, that I was a guest. I was a successful woman. I was going to stay for 2 hours, smile at the neighbors, eat a shrimp cocktail, and leave. I rang the doorbell. The door swung open, but it wasn't a greeter who met me. It was Veronica. She looked spectacular. I had to give her that. She was wearing a floor-length gold-sequined gown that shimmered like liquid money. Her hair was swept up in a chignon so tight it probably acted as a facelift, but her eyes were not festive. They were scanning the driveway, checking for late arrivals, before they snapped onto me. "You're late," she hissed, grabbing my wrist and pulling me inside before I could even stomp the snow off my boots. "Hello to you too, Veronica," I said, trying to pull my arm back. "I'm right on time. The invitation said 6. The invitation is for guests." "Elena," she snapped, her voice low so the people in the foyer wouldn't hear. "Family helps set the tone. Now, listen, the catering staff is competent, but they are slow. I need you to go to the kitchen and make sure the hors d'oeuvres are circulating clockwise. If people get stuck by the fireplace, the room feels crowded. Keep them moving." She shoved a small, laminate clipboard into my hands. "What is this?" I asked, staring at it. "The checklist," she said. "I noticed the valet service is getting backed up. After you check the kitchen, go out the side door and help organize the keys. We can't have the mayor waiting in the cold for his car later." "Veronica," I said, my voice hardening, "I am wearing heels. I am not parking cars." She smiled then, a terrifying, bright expression because a couple, the Hendersons, I think, was approaching us. "Oh, Elena, you are always so helpful," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly dripping with honey. "I knew you wouldn't mind checking on the coats. You are such an angel." She turned to Mrs. Henderson, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt heavy and possessive. "You know Elena, don't you? David's daughter. She is still single. Poor thing. So she has plenty of free time to help me run these little events. We are so lucky she doesn't have a husband to rush home to. Aren't we?" Mrs. Henderson gave me a pitying smile. "Oh, how nice of you. Dear, it is wonderful to see young people pitching in." I felt the blood rush to my face. I opened my mouth to say that I actually managed a team of 12 people and had a very busy life, but Veronica had already steered the Hendersons toward the bar. She looked back at me, her eyes hard as flint. "Kitchen, now." I stood there for a moment, gripping the clipboard. I looked across the expansive living room. The ceilings were 20 feet high, dominated by a Christmas tree that must have been 15 feet tall, flocked with white snow and decorated with hundreds of glass ornaments. Underneath it sat a mountain of gifts, wrapped in gold and cream paper. The room smelled of expensive cologne, pine needles, and roast beef. I scanned the crowd for my father. I found him near the marble fireplace, mixing a drink for a man I recognized as one of the city council members. Dad looked dashing in his tuxedo. Playing the part of the gracious host, he looked up, his eyes meeting mine across the sea of black ties and cocktail dresses. I widened my eyes at him, a silent plea. Do you see this? Do you see what she is doing? He paused, the shaker in his hand. Then, he looked at the clipboard I was holding. He hesitated, gave me a tight, apologetic smile, and turned back to the councilman, laughing loudly at a joke I couldn't hear. He had seen, and he had looked away. I swallowed the lump in my throat and walked toward the kitchen. The next 2 hours were a blur of servitude. I didn't park cars, but I did everything else. I directed the servers, showing them where Veronica hid the extra napkins. I reorganized the coat rack when it collapsed under the weight of 50 fur coats. I cleaned up a spilled glass of red wine on the white rug before it could stain, scrubbing on my hands and knees while guests stepped around me as if I were part of the furniture. At one point, Brianna and Caleb found me in the hallway. I was carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes back to the kitchen. "Die Elena?" Caleb asked. He was wearing a miniature tuxedo and looked uncomfortable. "When are you coming to see the train set? You promised." "I'm trying, buddy," I said, balancing the tray on my hip. "I just have to help your mom with a few things first." Brianna frowned, adjusting her velvet headband. "But Mom is just talking to people. Why do you have to work? You're a guest too." Out of the mouths of babes. "It's complicated." "Bree," I said softly, "go save me a spot by the train, okay? I'll be there soon." They ran off, and I watched them go, feeling a pang of jealousy. They were allowed to be children. I was never allowed to be anything other than useful. By 8 o'clock, I was starving. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and the smell of the food was agonizing. The caterers had put out a spread that looked like something from a magazine. Towers of chilled shrimp, skewers of beef tenderloin with horseradish cream, and a charcuterie board that spanned 6 feet. I found a quiet moment when the kitchen was empty of servers. I leaned against the granite island, my feet throbbing. There was a platter of prosciutto-wrapped melon on the counter, ready to be taken out. It looked incredible. I reached out and picked up a single piece. My hand was shaking slightly from low blood sugar. Just as I was lifting it to my mouth, the swinging door flew open. Veronica marched in. She stopped dead when she saw me. "What do you think you are doing?" she whispered, her voice slicing through the air like a whip. I'm eating." "Veronica," I said, lowering the food. "I haven't had anything all night." She crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the melon from my hand, tossing it into the trash can. "That is for the guests," she hissed. "The tray isn't even full yet. Do you have no manners? You don't eat until everyone else has been served." I stared at her, stunned. "Veronica, there are 500 pieces of food out there. 1 piece of melon isn't going to bankrupt you." "It is the principle." "Elena," she said, adjusting her diamond earrings in the reflection of the oven door, "you are here to represent the family, not to stuff your face in the corner like a raccoon. Now, fix your lipstick. You look washed out." She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and grab a bottle of the vintage Pinot Noir from the cellar. Mr. Sterling asked for it specifically. Don't drop it. It costs more than your monthly rent." I stood in the kitchen, trembling. I wasn't just hungry anymore. I was hollow. I looked at the trash can where she had thrown the food. It wasn't about the melon. It was about dominance. It was about reminding me that in her house, I had no rights, not even the right to sustenance. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and went to the cellar. When I came back up with the wine, Veronica was holding court in the center of the living room. She was talking to Mr. Sterling, a wealthy developer who had bought 3 properties from her last year. "Ah, here she is," Veronica announced as I approached. "Our little helper." She took the bottle from me without saying thank you. Mr. Sterling smiled at me. He was a nice man, oblivious to the toxicity radiating off my stepmother. "Thank you. Elena," he said, "you are doing a wonderful job tonight. Veronica, you must pay her a fortune to manage an event this size. My event planner charges me an arm and a leg." The room seemed to go quiet. I waited for her to say something gracious. I waited for her to say, "Oh, she's my daughter. She's doing this out of love." Instead, Veronica laughed, a tinkling, champagne-fueled sound. "Oh, Richard, please," she said, placing a hand on my arm and squeezing. "Why would I hire staff when I have Elena? She is much cheaper, and she knows better than to complain. Besides, it gives her something to do with her hands." The guests chuckled. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the group. They thought it was a joke, a witty, self-deprecating family joke. I felt like I had been slapped. I stood there, frozen, while the laughter washed over me. I was 29 years old. I was a professional, and I was being discussed like a discounted appliance. I looked at my father. He was standing right next to Mr. Sterling. He heard it. He heard her call me cheap labor. He took a sip of his drink and looked at the ceiling. "Excuse me," I muttered, pulling away from Veronica's grip. I need to check the thermostat." I walked away fast, my vision blurring. I needed to get out. I needed air. I headed toward the back of the house, toward the quieter sitting room where the noise of the party was dampened. As I rounded the corner, I almost ran into someone. It was Grandpa Walter. He was standing in the archway, leaning on his cane. He was wearing his old tweed coat, looking completely out of place among the sequins and tuxedos. He hadn't taken his hat off yet. "Grandpa," I breathed. "I didn't know you were here." He looked at me. His eyes traveled from my flushed face to the empty tray I was still clutching. He looked at the way my shoulders were hunched, the posture of someone expecting a blow. "I just got here," he said, his voice rough. "I've been standing here for 5 minutes." Then he had seen the way Veronica grabbed me. He had heard the comment about the staff. "You look tired, kid," he said quietly. "I'm fine," I lied. "It's just a busy party." Walter looked past me, toward the living room where Veronica's laugh was ringing out again. "She's got you running laps, doesn't she?" he asked. "I just wanted to help Dad," I whispered. Walter's jaw tightened. He looked at the tray in my hand. "Put that down, Elena." "What?" "Put the tray down. You are a marshal. You are not a waitress." I hesitated, then set the silver tray on a side table. It made a loud clatter. Grandpa Walter looked up at the ceiling, then at the corners of the room. "What are those?" he asked, pointing with his cane. I looked up. In the corner of the ceiling, blinking with a faint red light, was a small, sleek black dome. "Oh," I said. "Veronica had those installed last week. It's a new security system. She said with all the expensive art and jewelry in the house, she wanted to be safe. There are cameras in every room now." "Every room?" Walter asked, his eyes narrowing. "Pretty much," I said. "Even the kitchen and the hallways. The monitor is in the study, but she has it linked to an app on her phone. She likes to show the guests how high-tech it is." Walter stared at the camera for a long moment. A strange expression crossed his face. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was calculation. It was the look of a man who had just been handed a weapon he didn't know he needed. "Security," he muttered, "to protect her assets." "Yeah," I said bitterly. "She's very protective of her things." Walter looked back at me. His gaze softened. "Go get yourself a drink, Elena, a real one, and if she tells you to do one more thing, you tell her to come talk to me." "I can't cause a scene." "Grandpa," I said, "not tonight." He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes, a scene is exactly what is needed to clear the air. But go. Rest for a minute." I watched him walk into the main party, a dark cloud moving into a sunny sky. I felt a tiny spark of relief, knowing he was there, but I also felt a deep, twisting dread. The night wasn't over. The alcohol was flowing. Veronica's ego was swelling with every compliment she received, and my patience was worn down to a fraying thread. I didn't know it then, but the cameras Walter had noticed, those silent, unblinking eyes, were recording everything. They were recording the laughter, the lies, and the clinking glasses, and in less than an hour, they would record the moment that would tear this family apart forever. I walked toward the kitchen again, intending to just get a glass of water and hide for a while, but as I passed the dining room, I heard Veronica's voice calling my name again, sharp and demanding, cutting through the jazz music like a knife. "Elena, we are out of the truffle dip. Fix it." I closed my eyes. The break was over. The nightmare was just entering its second act. By 11:30 at night, the air in the house had changed. It was no longer crisp with the scent of pine and anticipation. Now it was heavy, thick with the smell of stale red wine, expensive perfume that had turned cloying, and the exhausted breath of 50 people who had been socializing for too long. I was standing near the swinging door that connected the dining room to the butler's pantry, leaning against the wall. My feet were throbbing in a way that wasn't just pain. It was a deep, rhythmic pulsing that traveled all the way up my calves. I had been on my feet for nearly 6 hours straight. I had refilled glasses, wiped up spills, directed lost guests to the bathroom, and smiled until the muscles in my face felt brittle, like dried clay. The party was winding down, but the core group, the important people Veronica needed to impress, was still clustered in the living room, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I was just calculating how long it would take me to slip out the back door without being noticed when Veronica materialized in front of me. Her makeup was still flawless, but there was a frantic, glassy look in her eyes that I recognized instantly. It was the look of a conductor who realized the orchestra was about to miss a beat. "Elena," she said, her voice tight and breathless. "Mrs. Vanderhoven just asked for the peppermint mocha cheesecake." I blinked at her, my brain moving slowly through the fog of exhaustion. "Okay, is it in the fridge?" Veronica's fingers dug into my arm, her nails sharp against my skin. "No, I forgot to pick it up from the bakery. I ordered it 3 weeks ago, but with everything else going on, I forgot to send the courier." She stared at me, her eyes wide and demanding, waiting for me to solve the problem she had created. "Well," I said, my voice raspy, "then tell her we have the chocolate tart instead. It's delicious." "You don't understand," Veronica hissed, leaning in close so the guests wouldn't see her panic. "She specifically requested it. She is the head of the zoning committee. Elena, if I don't give her what she wants, she will think I am incompetent. I need you to go get one." I looked at my watch. "Veronica, it is almost midnight. The bakery is closed. Every bakery in Denver is closed. It is Christmas Eve." "The superstore on Colfax is open," she said, her tone snapping from panic to command. "They have a bakery section. They are open 24/7. Go buy a peppermint cheesecake. Remove the packaging, put it on the crystal platter, and garnish it with fresh mint. She won't know the difference." I stared at her. The superstore was 30 minutes away. It was snowing heavily outside. She wanted me to drive an hour round trip, in a blizzard, at midnight, to buy a grocery store cake to save her ego. Something inside me, a wall that had been eroding for years, finally collapsed. "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us, small but solid as a stone. Veronica blinked, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, louder this time. "I am not going to the grocery store. I have been here since this afternoon. I have worked your party for 6 hours. I am exhausted. My feet are bleeding, and I have a flight to catch in 2 days. I am done." The mask of the perfect hostess dropped. For a split second, I saw the pure, unadulterated rage beneath it. She looked around quickly to ensure no one was watching. Then she grabbed my upper arm. Her grip was like a vice. "Come with me," she snarled through a fixed smile. She dragged me backward, through the swinging door and into the butler's pantry. This was a narrow transition room between the kitchen and the dining area, lined with high cabinets and a second refrigerator. It was isolated, soundproofed by heavy oak doors on both sides. It was also, I remembered with a jolt, one of the rooms where she had installed a camera. It was a small black dome mounted high in the corner, near the crown molding, its tiny red light blinking steadily in the semi-darkness. Veronica didn't look at the camera. She was too focused on me. She shoved me backward, releasing my arm only to point a manicured finger in my face. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare you embarrass me in my own house, after everything I have done for you?" "You haven't done anything for me," I said, my voice shaking but my resolve holding. "I did this for you, all of it." "You ungrateful little brat," she spat. "I took you in when your mother died. I gave you a home. I helped you get your first apartment. Do you remember that? When you were 22 and couldn't afford the deposit? Who wrote the check? I did. And I paid you back," I shot back, stepping forward. "I paid you back every single cent within 6 months, with interest, because you made me sign a loan agreement. Do not act like it was charity." "It was charity because no one else would want you," she screamed, her voice rising now, abandoning the whisper. "You are just like your mother, moping around, playing the victim, sucking the joy out of everything. You are a parasite, Elena, a sad, lonely parasite clinging to this family because you have nothing of your own." The words hit me like physical blows, designed to target my deepest insecurities, but instead of crying, I felt a cold, hard anger crystallizing in my chest. "I have plenty of my own," I said, my voice deadly calm. "And after tonight, I am taking it all back. I am leaving. Veronica, get your own cheesecake." I turned to walk toward the door leading to the hallway. I never made it. I heard the rustle of her dress, and then a hard shove against my shoulder blades. I wasn't expecting it. I was wearing 4-inch heels on a sleek hardwood floor. I stumbled forward, flailing, and crashed hard into the stainless steel refrigerator. My forehead slammed against the metal door with a sickening thud, and the room spun violently. I gasped, sliding down to my knees, clutching the handle of the fridge to keep from collapsing completely. "Don't you walk away from me!" Veronica shrieked. I looked up, dazed, shaking my head to clear the stars from my vision. She was standing over me, her chest heaving, her face twisted into a snarl that looked demonic in the dim light. "You don't get to leave until I dismiss you," she yelled. She reached down, grabbed a handful of my hair, and yanked my head back. I cried out, the pain searing through my scalp. She hauled me up to my feet, spinning me around so I faced her. Before I could raise my hands to defend myself, she slapped me. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a vicious, open-handed strike across my left cheekbone that snapped my head to the side. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. My ears started ringing instantly, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the distant jazz music. "You are nothing!" she screamed, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. "You are not my daughter. You are just the help, and you will do what you are told." She raised her hand to hit me again. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for the impact. But the blow never came. "Veronica." The voice came from the doorway. It was my father. I opened my eyes. David Marshall was standing in the entrance to the pantry, holding a half-empty glass of scotch. He was staring at us, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. He had seen it. I knew he had seen it. The angle of the door meant he had walked in just as her hand connected with my face. He had heard her scream that I wasn't her daughter. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was Veronica's ragged breathing and the hum of the refrigerator behind me. Veronica froze. She looked at her hand, still raised in the air, then at my father, and then at me. In a split second, I saw the calculation happen behind her eyes. She lowered her hand slowly, her face crumpling into a mask of distress. "David," she gasped, her voice suddenly trembling with fake tears. "Oh, David, thank God. She was hysterical. She was screaming at me. I tried to calm her down, but she lunged." I stared at her, horrified. The lie was so quick, so effortless. "Liar," I whispered, my voice breaking. I looked at my father. I stepped away from the fridge, my hand coming up to touch my cheek, which was already throbbing and hot to the touch. "Dad," I said. "Dad, she hit me. She slammed me into the fridge." My father looked at me. He looked at the red mark blooming on my cheek. Then he looked at Veronica. who was now weeping into her hands, looking like a fragile flower that had been trampled. He looked back at the door leading to the party. He looked terrified, not for me, but for the noise. "Keep your voices down," he hissed, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. The guests are right outside. They can hear you." I felt my heart stop. "That is what you care about?" I asked, my voice rising. "The guests? Dad, she just assaulted me." "It was an accident," Veronica sobbed, reaching out for him. "I was just trying to get her to listen. She's been drinking. David, I think she's drunk. She's been acting crazy all night." "I haven't had a drop of alcohol," I screamed. "You wouldn't let me eat or drink anything." "Elena, stop shouting," my father snapped. He moved between us, but he didn't face her. He faced me. He put his hands up, as if I were the threat. "Everyone is stressed," he said, his voice pleading. "It is Christmas. Emotions are high. Veronica didn't mean to hurt you. Look at her. She's shaking." I looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time in years, I didn't see a father. I saw a coward, a man so desperate to keep his comfortable life that he would watch his child be beaten and blame her for the noise it made. "You saw it," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a scream. "You walked in. You saw her hit me. Don't lie to me. Dad, did you see it?" He flinched. He couldn't meet my eyes. He looked at his shoes. "I saw a misunderstanding," he mumbled. "I saw two women who need to calm down." He turned to Veronica and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Honey, your mascara is running. You need to go to the master bathroom and fix your face. The mayor is asking for you. I'll handle Elena." Veronica sniffled, nodding bravely. She looked at me over his shoulder. For one brief second, the mask slipped again, and she gave me a look of pure triumph. "I win," that look said. "I always win." "Okay," she whispered. "I'm sorry. David, I just want everything to be perfect." She slipped out of the room, leaving me alone with him. My father sighed, a heavy, pathetic sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to me. "You're bleeding," he said, gesturing to my lip. I hadn't realized she had split my lip when she hit me. I didn't take the handkerchief. "You let her go," I said. "Elena, please," he said, looking exhausted. "Don't make this into a tragedy. She's under a lot of pressure. You know how she gets. Just clean yourself up. Put some ice on your face. And for God's sake, smile when you come out. We have an hour left before people start leaving." "You want me to go back out there?" I asked, incredulous. "I want us to get through Christmas," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "I want peace. Elena, can you give me that? Just tonight. Don't make a scene." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him, eager to get back to his scotch and his charade. I stood there in the silence of the pantry. My head was pounding. My lip tasted of copper, and my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. "Don't make a scene." I looked up at the corner of the room, at the little black dome with the blinking red light. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just Elena, the doormat, the peacekeeper, the girl who would swallow blood to keep the carpet clean. I turned and walked to the small powder room attached to the kitchen hallway, the one the guests didn't use. I locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely slide the bolt. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a wreck. My hair was disheveled where she had grabbed it. There was a red, angry welt rising on my cheekbone, shaped like a hand. My lip was swollen and trickling a thin line of blood. My eyes were wild, wide with shock and adrenaline. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers fumbled as I opened the camera app. I took a photo, then another. I turned my face to catch the light on the bruise. I pulled my hair back to show the redness at the roots. I lifted my sleeve to show the finger marks on my arm where she had grabbed me earlier. Click, click, click. I stared at the photos. They were ugly. They were undeniable. I washed the blood off my lip with cold water. I didn't put ice on my face. I didn't want the swelling to go down. I wanted it to be there. I wanted to feel it. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She wasn't the daughter who cooked the turkey. She wasn't the girl who wrapped the gifts. She was someone new. She was someone dangerous. Grandpa Walter was right. It was time to stop holding up the sky. I unlocked the door. I wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. I was going to do something much, much worse. I was going to let them think they had won, while I prepared to burn their entire kingdom to the ground. The morning after Christmas did not arrive with peace. It arrived with a dull, throbbing ache in my left shoulder and a bruise on my temple that looked like a blooming violet under the harsh fluorescent lights of my bathroom mirror. I had driven back to my apartment in Denver at 2 a.m, navigating the snowy highway with hands that shook so violently I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had collapsed into bed fully clothed, still wearing the red velvet dress that smelled of stale party food and my stepmother's cloying perfume. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the blinds, casting stripes of light across my duvet. For a split second, in that hazy space between sleep and wakefulness, I forgot. Then I moved my neck, and the stiffness flared up, dragging the memory of the pantry, the refrigerator door, and the slap back into sharp focus. I rolled over and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. I don't know what I was expecting. An apology? A check-in? A text from my father asking if I was okay? There were 3 notifications. The first was from Veronica. It had come in at 9:30 in the morning. "Hey, sweetie. I hope you got home safe. I was so worried about you last night. You were so tipsy. Thank goodness I pulled you into the pantry before you stumbled into the Christmas tree and knocked it over. That would have been a disaster. Let's just keep that little stumble between us, okay? Don't want people thinking you have a problem. Love you." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. It was a masterclass in rewriting history. In 3 sentences, she had transformed a physical assault into a drunken accident. She had cast herself as the savior who caught me, rather than the aggressor who shoved me. And the kicker, the subtle thread at the end about having a problem, was designed to make me question my own credibility. I hadn't had a single drop of alcohol, not one sip. The second text was from my father. "Elena, I know things got heated. Veronica is very stressed, and she has a bit of a temper. You know that. But please, for the sake of the family, let's just put this behind us. Bashing the family or making a scene will only make everything worse for everyone, especially for you. Just rest up and forget it happened." Forget it happened, the Marshall family motto. I sat up, ignoring the pain in my head, and opened the Facebook app. I needed to see the battlefield. If Veronica was texting me this narrative privately, she was certainly broadcasting a version of it publicly. I didn't have to scroll far. It was the first thing on my feed, posted 2 hours ago. There was a photo of Veronica and my father, standing in front of the massive tree. They looked perfect. He was smiling that politician smile, and she was glowing in her gold dress, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Christmas is a reminder that even when things get chaotic, love conquers all." We had a beautiful night with friends and family, despite a few little hiccups caused by a family member who couldn't quite handle their holiday spirits and emotions. It is heartbreaking when someone you love struggles to find peace, but we are choosing to focus on the joy. Thank you to everyone who came. Family. First love wins. Christmas blessings. I felt bile rise in my throat. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Everyone in our circle knew I was the only other family member there besides the kids. She had painted me as the drunk, emotional wreck who ruined the vibe, while she was the benevolent matriarch tolerating my behavior. I clicked on the comments. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. "So sorry you had to deal with that. V, you are a saint for putting up with it," wrote one of her tennis friends. "Praying for her," wrote another. And then, a comment from my great-aunt Linda, a woman who lived 3 states away and only knew what Veronica told her on the phone. Some of the younger generation just don't know how to be grateful for what they are given. You have done so much for that girl. Sad she can't respect the holiday." I threw the phone onto the mattress. It bounced harmlessly, but I wanted to smash it against the wall. I was being erased. My pain was being repackaged as ingratitude. My bruise was being sold as a drunken fall. I was sitting alone in my apartment, 29 years old, successful, independent, and yet I felt like a helpless child locked in a room while the adults discussed my fate. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. My movements mechanical. I needed caffeine to clear the fog. As the machine hissed and sputtered, my phone buzzed again. I flinched. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see another person telling me I was crazy. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw the name Brianna. My heart softened instantly. Brianna, 15 years old, the only person in that house, besides Caleb, who was innocent. "Dear Elena," the text read, "Are you okay? Mom is acting weird today. She told us not to text you because you are sleeping it off, but I wanted to check." I hesitated. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't burden a 15-year-old with the knowledge that her mother was abusive. But I couldn't lie, either. "I am okay." "Bree," I typed back, "I have a headache, but I'm fine. How are you and Caleb?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was typing a long message. "We are okay, but it was scary last night. We heard a loud bang from the kitchen, like someone fell. And then Mom was screaming. When Dad came out later, he told us to go upstairs. He said Mom was hurt because you shoved her. He said you were angry about the cheesecake. Is that true? Elena, did you hurt Mom?" I dropped the mug I was holding. It shattered on the floor. Ceramic shards exploding across the tile. Coffee splashing onto my bare feet. I didn't even feel the burn. "He said you shoved her." My father? My own father. He hadn't just remained silent. He had actively participated in the lie. He had looked his children in the eye and told them that I was the aggressor. He had poisoned them against me to protect Veronica. I sank down onto the kitchen floor, right next to the puddle of coffee. Tears finally came, hot and fast. This was worse than the slap. The slap was physical. This was an assassination of my character in the eyes of the people I loved most. I picked up my phone with trembling fingers. I needed to say something. I couldn't let them win this. I couldn't let the silence swallow me whole again. I typed a reply to Brianna. "I would never hurt your mother. Bree, you know me. Please believe that. It was a complicated night, but I did not hurt anyone." Then, I opened the Facebook app again. My finger hovered over the status box. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. If I posted the truth, I started a war. If I said nothing, I accepted the lie. I chose the middle ground, a warning shot. I typed, "A slap to the face is not a misunderstanding. It is violence. Even if it happens on Christmas. Even if it happens in a beautiful house. The truth has a way of coming out." I hit post before I could lose my nerve. I sat there on the floor, staring at the screen, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. 3 minutes. That was all it took. My phone rang. It was my father. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. Then came the text from him. "Take it down, now. Are you insane? Do you have any idea who sees your profile? Veronica's clients follow you. My business partners follow you. You are humiliating us. If you do not delete that post in 5 minutes, do not bother coming to any family events again. You are acting like a child." I read the text twice. Do not bother coming to any family events again. He was threatening to cut me off. He was choosing his reputation over my safety. He was willing to exile his daughter to keep his wife happy. I didn't take the post down, but I changed the privacy settings so only my close friends could see it. It was a retreat. Yes, but I wasn't ready to burn the bridge completely. Not yet. I needed a plan. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state. I cleaned up the broken coffee mug. I iced my face. I sat on my couch wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall outside my window. Feeling a profound, aching loneliness. I felt like I was screaming underwater. Everyone saw the ripples. but no one could hear the sound. Evening came early, the winter sky turning a bruised purple by 4:30. I ordered takeout that I knew I wouldn't eat, and sat with my laptop, trying to catch up on some work emails to distract myself. At 7 o'clock, a notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was an email to my personal account. The subject line made my blood run cold. Some people see everything. I hovered my mouse over it. It looked like spam, or a threat. I clicked it open. There was no body text, no "Hello Elena," no explanation, just a single attachment. A video file labeled Kitchen Cam 02, Deck 24, 2345, and a signature at the bottom, a witness in the family. My hand shook so bad I could barely navigate the trackpad. I clicked on the file. The video player opened. The footage was grainy but clear, filmed from a high angle in black and white. It showed the butler's pantry. I saw myself. Standing by the fridge, I saw Veronica enter. I watched, holding my breath, as the scene replayed. There was no sound at first, just the silent, jerky movements of an argument. I saw her point her finger. I saw me step back. I saw her shove me. I watched myself crash into the refrigerator. I saw my head snap back. Then, I clicked the volume icon. The audio was tinny, but audible. "You are nothing!" Her voice shrieked through my laptop speakers. "You are not my daughter. You are just the help." I watched the slap. It looked even worse on camera. Her arms swung with terrifying force. And then, the most damning part? I saw the door open. I saw my father step in. The timestamp on the video confirmed he was there seconds after the hit. "Two people who need to calm down," his voice said on the recording. I paused the video. I sat back in the dark of my living room, the glow of the screen illuminating the bruise on my face. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't imagining it. It existed. It was real. It was captured in digital code, preserved forever. I looked at the sender's address. It was a Proton Mail account. Encrypted, anonymous, but the signature gave it away. A witness in the family. Grandpa Walter. It had to be. He was the one who pointed out the cameras. He was the one who told me to stop holding up the sky. A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't happiness. The video was a horror movie starring my own life, but it was relief, powerful, overwhelming relief. I had a weapon. I looked at the phone where my father's threatening text still glowed. "Take it down. You are humiliating us." I looked back at the video. I realized then that the war wasn't over. It had just begun. But this time, I wasn't going into battle with a serving tray and a forced smile. I was going in with the nuclear codes. I closed the laptop, but I didn't delete the email. I forwarded it to a secure drive. I downloaded it to my phone. I saved it to a USB stick. Then I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Denver. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to talk about what happened? Let's talk." I felt the fear receding, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They thought they could bury me under lies and social media posts. They thought I would fade away into the background like I always did. They were wrong. The girl who napped in the basement while wrapping gifts was gone. The woman standing in the window had evidence, and in 2 days, at the family meeting in Evergreen, I was going to serve it to them on a silver platter. The morning of December 27th broke with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was frigid, the kind of cold that settles deep in your bones and refuses to leave. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. It had been 36 hours since I received the anonymous email with the video file. 36 hours of rewatching the worst moment of my life, analyzing it frame by frame like a football coach studying game tape. My phone buzzed. It was Grandpa Walter. "Elena." His voice came through the line. It sounded different than I had ever heard it. Usually, Walter Marshall sounded like gravel being crushed under a heavy boot. Rough, loud, and commanding. Today he sounded like a glacier. Cold, massive, dangerous. "Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you send it?" I did, he replied. There was no hesitation. I told you I had eyes in that house. Veronica calls them her security system, but she forgets who paid for the installation. I had the contractor set up a remote access server months ago. I don't trust people who smile that much. Elena, never have. I gripped the phone tighter. You saw it. I saw it, he said, and I heard the distinct click of a lighter and the inhale of a cigar, a habit he only indulged in when he was thinking about war. I had the technicians pull the logs the moment I saw you walk out of that pantry, looking like you had gone 10 rounds in a boxing ring. I watched the whole thing. He exhaled, a long, slow sound. I cannot stand the sight of my son's new wife beating my granddaughter in the Marshall house, he said. The words were precise, devoid of the emotional hysteria that plagued my father. He spoke of it not as a family tragedy, but as a violation of a code. And I cannot stand the sight of my son standing there, watching it happen, and doing nothing but worrying about the noise. He told everyone I was drunk, I said, the injustice rising in my throat again. He told Brianna I shoved her. I know, Walter said. I have seen the texts. I have seen the Facebook posts. She is running a very efficient PR campaign against you. What are we going to do? I asked. We are going to hold a meeting, Walter said. Be at my house in Evergreen today at 3 o'clock. The rest of them are coming at 5. I want you there early. There is someone you need to meet. Who? Nora Hastings, he said. My lawyer. I drove up to Evergreen with a knot of anxiety in my stomach so tight it felt like a stone. The roads were icy, winding up into the foothills where the pine trees grew thick and tall, blocking out the weak winter sun. Grandpa Walter's house was a sprawling lodge made of timber and stone, perched on a ridge that overlooked the valley. It was a beautiful house, but it was intimidating. It looked like a fortress designed to withstand a siege. When I pulled into the circular driveway, there was only one other car there, a sleek, black sedan that looked like it cost more than my entire education. I walked inside. The house smelled of wood smoke and old leather. Walter was in his study, a massive room lined with bookshelves that reached the ceiling. A fire was roaring in the stone hearth. Sitting in one of the wingback chairs was a woman I didn't know. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair cut into a sharp bob and glasses that framed intelligent, predatory eyes. She wore a charcoal suit that looked tailored to within an inch of its life. Elena, Walter said from behind his desk. He didn't smile. He looked tired, his face etched with deep lines, but his eyes were alert. This is Nora Hastings. She handles the corporate litigation for Marshall Ridge Holdings. Nora stood up and extended a hand. Her grip was firm, dry, and professional. Ms. Marshall, she said. Her voice was cool and crisp. I have reviewed the footage. I felt a flush of shame. It was one thing for my grandfather to see me get slapped. It was another for a stranger to watch it. It is hard to watch, I murmured. It is excellent evidence, Nora corrected me, sitting back down and opening a leather folder. In the state of Colorado, what Veronica did constitutes third-degree assault. The fact that she then went on social media to claim you were intoxicated and the aggressor adds a layer of defamation that is quite actionable. And your father's presence, well, that complicates his standing significantly. Grandpa said this meeting was about assets, I said, looking at Walter. It is, Walter said. Originally, today was supposed to be the day I announced the transition plan. I am 78. Elena, I cannot run the board forever. I was planning to give David a controlling interest. I was planning to step back. He picked up a heavy crystal tumbler of water and looked at it. But a man who cannot protect his own child from his wife cannot be trusted to protect a company with 400 employees, he said. If he bends the knee to a bully in his kitchen, he will bend the knee to a competitor in the boardroom. It is the same character flaw. So, what is the plan? I asked. Do I show them the video? Not yet, Nora said sharply. She leaned forward. Veronica is currently controlling the narrative. She feels safe. She believes she has successfully discredited you. If you post that video online now, she will spin it. She will claim it is edited, or she will claim you provoked her in a part that was cut out. She will muddy the waters before the truth has a chance to settle. We need her to commit, Walter added. We need her to sit in this room, in front of witnesses, and tell her lie one last time. We need her to be so confident in her deception that when we pull the rug out, she has nowhere to land. Witnesses? I asked. Who else is coming? Walter smiled, a grim, humorless expression. Everyone, David and Veronica, of course, the children, your Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike, and I have also invited 3 of the senior board members from the company, Arthur Pims, Joyce Miller, and Robert Thorne. My eyes widened. The board members? Grandpa, why? Because Veronica thinks this is a social call mixed with a payday, Walter said. She thinks she is coming here to watch David be crowned king. She has been bragging about it all week. I want the people who control the money to see exactly who she is. I want them to see the liability she represents. It was ruthless. It was a corporate ambush disguised as a family gathering. She has no idea, I whispered. She has no idea, Walter confirmed. I checked the family group chat. She asked if she should bring champagne. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I don't know if I can do it. Grandpa, sitting there, listening to her lie. You can, Walter said. He stood up and walked around the desk. He looked smaller than I remembered, but he felt solid when he put his hand on my shoulder. You are a marshal. We do not break. We might bend. We might bleed. But we do not break. You have been taking her hits for 10 years. Elena, today, you stop taking them. Today, you return fire. We spent the next hour going over the legal details with Nora. She explained exactly how the meeting would run. It was structured like a deposition, though Veronica wouldn't know that until it was too late. Nora coached me on what to say, and more importantly, what not to say. Do not get emotional, Nora warned. She will try to trigger you. She knows your buttons. She installed them. If you scream, you look unstable. If you cry, you look weak. You must be cold. You must be the one person in the room who deals only in facts. By 4:30, the winter sun had dipped behind the mountains, plunging the valley into a blue-gray twilight. I went to the guest bathroom to wash my face. I looked in the mirror. The bruise on my temple was yellowing, and my lip was still swollen. I didn't cover them with makeup. Nora had told me not to. Let them see it, she had said. Let it be the first thing they notice. I walked back out to the main living room, which had been rearranged. The comfortable sofas had been pushed back. In the center of the room, Walter had arranged a circle of high-backed wooden chairs. It looked less like a living room and more like a tribunal. Facing the chairs was a large flat-screen television that usually sat unused in a cabinet. Today, it was pulled out, its black screen reflecting the firelight. At 5 o'clock, the headlights appeared in the driveway. I stood by the window, watching them arrive. My father's SUV pulled up first. I saw Veronica get out. She was wearing a white cashmere coat and a fur hat. She looked like a snow queen, pristine and untouchable. She was laughing at something my father said. She looked happy. She looked victorious. Brianna and Caleb climbed out of the back seat. They looked less enthusiastic. Caleb was kicking at the snow, and Brianna was hugging her arms around herself, looking down at her phone. Then the other cars arrived, Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike, who always followed the money, and then the luxury sedans of the board members. I felt a wave of nausea. This was it. Ready? Walter asked. He was standing beside me, leaning on his cane. He was wearing a dark suit, impeccably pressed. I think so, I said. Remember, he said, his voice low, you are not alone anymore. For a long time. I let you fight this battle by yourself because I thought it would make you tough. I was wrong. It just made you tired. Tonight, you don't have to carry it. The front door opened. A gust of cold wind blew into the hallway, followed by the noise of voices. Walter, Veronica's voice rang out, shrill and cheerful. Oh, it is freezing out there. We brought the most darling bottle of cognac for you. She swept into the room, bringing the cold air with her. She stopped when she saw the arrangement of the chairs. She stopped when she saw Nora Hastings sitting by the fire with a stack of files. And then she saw me. I was standing next to the fireplace, wearing a black turtleneck and gray slacks. I wasn't smiling. I was staring right at her. Veronica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her eyes flicked to the bruise on my face, then to my father, who was walking in behind her carrying a box of gifts. "Elena," she said, her voice dropping into that fake, concerned register she used for audiences. "I didn't know you were coming. I thought, well, after the other night, I thought you might be taking some space to heal." She emphasized the word heal in a way that suggested rehabilitation, not recovery from an injury. "I am here for the meeting," I said calmly. "Of course," Veronica said, recovering quickly. She turned to the board members who were filing in behind her. "Arthur, Joyce, so wonderful to see you. I didn't realize this was going to be such a formal affair. David, darling, put the gifts down. It looks like we are talking business first." She was manic with energy. She moved around the room, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, acting as if she were the hostess of this house too. She completely ignored the tension radiating from Walter. She ignored the fact that there were no refreshments served, no music playing. She sat down in one of the chairs near the center, arranging her coat around her. She patted the empty chair next to her. "David, sit here," she commanded. Then she looked at me. "Elena, there are some folding chairs in the back if you want to pull one up." "Elena will sit here," Walter said. His voice cut through the chatter like a knife. He pointed to the leather armchair to his immediate right, the position of honor. The room went quiet. The board members exchanged glances. My father looked confused. Veronica blinked, her smile freezing in place. "Oh," she said. "Well, that is nice, I suppose." Walter moved to the head of the room. He didn't sit. He stood in front of the cold, black television screen, leaning on his cane. He waited until everyone was seated. The silence stretched out, becoming uncomfortable, then heavy, then suffocating. "Thank you all for coming," Walter began. He didn't offer a welcome. He didn't offer pleasantries. "I know many of you expected this gathering to be a celebration. I know my son and his wife certainly did." He looked at David. My father smiled nervously, trying to meet his father's eye, but Walter looked right through him. "I called you here to discuss the future of the Marshall family and the Marshall Ridge Company," Walter continued, "because, as we all know, the two are inextricably linked. Our name is our brand. Our reputation is our currency." Veronica nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, Walter. That is exactly what I always say. Family image is everything." "Indeed," Walter said, "which is why we need to discuss the events of Christmas Eve." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Veronica shifted in her seat. My father went pale. "I think," Veronica said, a little laugh bubbling up that sounded like breaking glass, "that we have already dealt with that. Walter, it was a stressful night. Elena had an episode. We have all agreed to move past it with love and forgiveness." "Is that what happened?" Walter asked. He turned his head slowly to look at me. "Elena, is that your recollection? That you had an episode?" I took a deep breath. I felt Nora's eyes on me, reminding me to be steady. I felt Brianna watching me from the corner where she sat with Caleb. "No," I said clearly. My voice didn't shake. "That is not what happened." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Veronica snapped, dropping the facade. "Are we really doing this? Here? In front of the board? Elena, don't be a child. You were drunk. You stumbled. You embarrassed yourself. Stop trying to drag us all down with you." "I wasn't drunk," I said. "And I didn't stumble." "David," Veronica hissed, turning to my father. "Control your daughter." My father looked at Walter, then at the board members, then at Veronica. He looked like a trapped animal. "Dad," he pleaded, "this isn't the place. Can we talk about the shares? We can deal with personal matters later." "This is the business," Walter roared. The sudden volume made everyone jump. "The moral bankruptcy of my successor is absolutely a business matter." He pointed the remote control at the television. Veronica says Elena was drunk, Walter said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Veronica says Elena fell. Veronica says she acted out of love. He looked at Veronica, whose face had gone from annoyed to wary. She sensed the trap now, but she didn't know the shape of it. Let's see what the house has to say, Walter said. He pressed the button. The screen flared to life. The timestamp appeared in the corner. December 24th, 23:45 p.m. Veronica gasped. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. She saw the black and white angle of the pantry. She saw herself. She saw me. "Turn it off," she shrieked, leaping out of her chair. "That is private. You cannot show that." "Sit down, Veronica," Walter bellowed. It was a command so powerful that she actually fell back into her seat, stunned. The video played. There was no sound at first, just the image of her shoving me into the fridge. Then the audio kicked in. The insults, the slap, the undeniable, brutal reality of it played out in high definition for the entire board of directors, for my aunt and uncle, and for her own children to see. I watched the faces in the room. Arthur Pims, the oldest board member, looked physically ill. My Aunt Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. Brianna was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't look away. And my father? He sat there, staring at the screen, watching his own cowardice replay in front of the people he wanted to lead. He watched himself walk in. He watched himself say, "Keep your voices down." When the video ended, the silence was total. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, leaving a vacuum where the air used to be. Walter turned off the TV. He looked at Veronica, who was trembling, her face the color of white ash. "Now," Walter said softly, "tell me again about how love conquers all." The atmosphere in the living room of the Evergreen Lodge was not festive. It was forensic. Grandpa Walter had arranged the space with the precision of a general preparing for a tribunal. The plush leather armchairs and the velvet settees, usually arranged in cozy semicircles around the fireplace, had been pulled back. In the center of the room, stiff-backed wooden chairs formed a tight circle. Facing them, the large flat-screen television, usually hidden behind a cabinet door, was exposed, its screen a dark, glossy void, reflecting the nervous faces of the people gathering before it. On the heavy oak coffee table in the center of the circle, there were no hors d'oeuvres, there was no wine. There was only a single, thick file folder embossed with the silver logo of Hastings, Thorne and Associates. I sat in the chair to Walter's right. My hands were folded in my lap, gripping each other so tightly that my knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. I watched them filter in. My father, looking dapper but anxious in a navy blazer. Veronica, radiating a manic, fragile energy in her white cashmere. Brianna and Caleb, looking small and confused, were ushered to a small sofa in the corner, away from the main circle but still within earshot. Then came the others, Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike, who always showed up when there was a rumor of money changing hands. And finally, the board members of Marshall Ridge Holdings, Arthur Pims, Joyce Miller, and Robert Thorne. Their presence turned the air in the room from tense to suffocating. They weren't here for a family chat. They were here because the majority shareholder had summoned them. Walter stood by the fireplace. He leaned heavily on his cane, but his posture was erect. When the last person had taken their seat, he cleared his throat. It was a dry, rasping sound that silenced the murmurs in the room instantly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Walter began. His voice was low, lacking its usual boom, which somehow made it more terrifying. "We are here today to discuss the future of the Marshall family assets and the leadership transition of the company." A ripple of excitement went through the room. I saw Veronica squeeze my father's knee. She smiled at him, a hungry, triumphant smile. She thought this was it, the coronation. "However," Walter continued, his eyes sweeping over the group like a searchlight, "before we discuss the distribution of wealth, we must address a question of character. There is a moral issue that has been brought to my attention, a rot in the foundation." Veronica's smile faltered, but only for a second. She adjusted her silk scarf. Walter pointed to a wooden box on the table next to the legal file. I am going to ask that everyone place their phones in this box. We will be discussing sensitive family matters, and I do not want any distractions, nor do I want any recordings leaving this room until I authorize them. There was a murmur of protest. Veronica laughed, a high, nervous tinkle. Oh, Walter, surely that isn't necessary, she said, clutching her purse. We are all family here, and trusted colleagues. The box, Veronica, Walter said. He didn't raise his voice, he just waited. One by one, they complied. The board members dropped their sleek smartphones in. My father surrendered his. Finally, Veronica, looking annoyed, dropped hers into the box with a loud clatter. Excellent, Walter said. He looked at me. Now, we need to clear the air regarding the events of Christmas Eve. There have been conflicting reports. Veronica jumped in immediately. She couldn't help herself. She was a creature of control, and silence was a vacuum she felt compelled to fill. Oh, Walter, please, she said, leaning forward and offering a sympathetic smile to the board members. I really don't think we need to bore Arthur and Joyce with our little domestic hiccups. It was just a misunderstanding. You know how the holidays are. Emotions run high. The champagne flows a little too freely. She turned her gaze to me. It was a look of pity, perfectly calibrated to dismiss me. Elena was under a lot of stress from work, Veronica explained to the room, her voice smooth as cream. She had a bit too much to drink, and she was very emotional. We had a small disagreement in the kitchen, and she slipped. It was unfortunate, but we have handled it. We are a family. We forgive. Right, David? My father nodded, staring at the rug. Right. It's over. Let's move on. Walter didn't look at David. He looked at me. Elena, he said, is that what happened? You were drunk? You slipped? My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the faces in the circle. The board members looked bored, ready to get to the financial part. Aunt Sarah looked embarrassed. Veronica looked confident, daring me to speak. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to hold me. No, I said. My voice was shaky at first, so I took a breath and started again. No, that is not what happened. Elena, sit down, my father hissed. Don't do this. I have been doing everything you asked for 10 years. Dad, I said, looking at him. I cooked the turkeys. I wrapped the gifts. I drove the cars. I cleaned the messes. I let Veronica treat me like an unpaid employee because I wanted you to be happy. I wanted to be part of this family. And you are, Veronica interrupted, her eyes widening. We love you. Elena, why are you being so dramatic? I turned to her. I am not being dramatic. Veronica, I am being honest. On Christmas Eve, you didn't ask me to leave because I was drunk. You dragged me into the pantry because I refused to drive an hour in a blizzard to buy a cheesecake you forgot to order. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Arthur Pims frowned. I told you I was tired, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I told you I had been working for 6 hours straight, and you didn't like hearing the word no. This is ridiculous, Veronica scoffed, looking at the board members. She is making this up. It is a delusion. You shoved me into the refrigerator, I said, stepping closer to the center of the circle. I hit my head, and when I tried to leave, you pulled my hair and you slapped me across the face. I reached up and brushed the hair away from my temple, revealing the yellow-green bruise that was still visible. I saw Aunt Sarah gasp. And the worst part, I said, turning back to my father, is that you walked in. You saw her hit me. You stood right there in the doorway, and you didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't tell her to stop. You told us to keep our voices down because the guests might hear. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. My father's face was a mask of misery. He wouldn't look up. David, Aunt Sarah asked, her voice quiet. Is that true? Of course it isn't true, Veronica shouted, standing up. Tears were now streaming down her face. Impressive, instant tears. I cannot believe this. After everything I have done for you. Elena, I took you in. I treated you like my own daughter. And this is how you repay me? By inventing these vicious lies in front of your grandfather? She turned to Walter, hands clasped in a plea. Walter, she is unstable, Veronica sobbed. She has always been jealous of me, jealous of the life David and I built. She hurt herself falling down, and now she is trying to blame me because she knows you are deciding on the inheritance. It is sick. It is a sick, manipulative game. It is disgusting, Uncle Mike muttered, shaking his head at me. Elena, you should be ashamed, airing this kind of laundry. I agree, Veronica sniffed, wiping her eyes with a tissue she produced from her sleeve. If there were cameras in that kitchen, you would all see the truth. You would see her stumbling around, screaming at me. You would see me trying to help her. But since there aren't, you just have to decide who you trust. The woman who has devoted her life to this family, or the girl who only shows up when she wants something. It was the line, the specific line Nora had predicted. If there were cameras. She had walked right off the cliff. Walter didn't say a word. He didn't look at Veronica. He simply lifted his hand, holding a small black remote control. He pointed it at the television screen. Actually, Walter said, his voice cutting through Veronica's sobs, there were... He pressed the button. The screen flared to life. Veronica froze. Her mouth was open, mid-sob, but no sound came out. She stared at the screen as the black and white footage appeared. It was crisp. It was clear. The timestamp in the corner read, December 24th, 11:45 at night. The room went dead silent. You could hear the fire crackling in the hearth. On the screen, everyone saw me standing by the refrigerator. They saw Veronica storm in. They saw her face, twisted in rage. Not the face of a loving stepmother, but the face of a tyrant. The audio was tinny but intelligible. You are nothing, the speakers blared Veronica's voice. You are just the help. I saw Arthur Pym's adjust his glasses, leaning forward. I saw Joyce Miller's jaw drop. Then came the shove, the violent, physical force of it. On screen, it looked brutal. My head snapped back against the steel door with a sickening thud. Then the hair pulling. Then the slap. It echoed in the quiet living room. Crack. And then, the door opened. My father walked into the frame. The room watched as David Marshall, the vice president of Marshall Ridge Holdings, stood and watched his wife assault his daughter. They watched him close the door. They heard him say the words that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Two people who need to calm down. The guests are right outside. Walter let the video play until the end, until my father walked out and left me bleeding in the pantry. Then he pressed the button again, and the screen went black. For 10 seconds, no one breathed. Then Veronica screamed. That is fake, she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that hurt the ears. That is not real. She edited it. She made it up with a computer. That is AI. She looked around wildly, searching for an ally. David, tell them. Tell them it didn't happen like that. My father didn't move. He looked like a statue made of ash. That is a deep fake, Veronica yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. You little witch. You faked it. Nora Hastings stood up. She picked up the file from the table and opened it. Her movement was calm, precise, and deadly. Ms. Marshall, Nora said, her voice cool and authoritative. The footage you just viewed was pulled directly from the cloud server of the security company you hired, specifically, Secure Home Systems. We have the chain of custody logs right here. Nora pulled out a document and slid it across the table toward the board members. This is the metadata, Nora explained, pointing to the columns of numbers. It confirms the time, date, and origin of the file. It also confirms that the file has not been altered, spliced, or edited in any way since it was recorded. Furthermore, we have a sworn affidavit from the technician who extracted it. Arthur Pym's picked up the paper. He looked at it. Then he looked at Veronica. His expression had changed completely. 5 minutes ago, he had looked at her with polite indifference. Now, he looked at her with something approaching revulsion. "It is authentic," Nora said, closing the file. "It is admissible in court, and it constitutes clear evidence of third-degree assault, battery, and witness tampering involving a minor, given the text messages sent to Brianna later that night." Veronica slumped back in her chair. The fight didn't leave her, but the confidence did. She looked cornered. Her eyes darted around the room, realizing that the narrative she had carefully constructed for years had just been incinerated in 3 minutes of video. Veronica stammered. I was under a lot of stress. You don't understand. Elena provoked me. She knows how to push my buttons." "Stress," Walter said, speaking for the first time since the video ended. He walked into the center of the circle. He looked at his son. "David," Walter said, "look at me." My father slowly raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. "You stood there," Walter said. "You stood there and you worried about the neighbors. You worried about the noise." "Dad," David whispered, I didn't know what to do." "You are a 55-year-old man," Walter said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You are the vice president of my company, and you didn't know what to do when your wife hit your child?" Walter turned to the board members. "Gentlemen, Joyce," Walter said, "you have just seen the character of the man who was supposed to lead this company. You have seen how he handles crisis. You have seen how he protects his people, or rather, how he fails to." Robert Thorne, a man who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. He looked at David. "It is concerning," Robert said. "Very concerning." Veronica let out a sob, but this time, nobody offered her a tissue. Nobody told her it was okay. The silence in the room wasn't just awkward anymore. It was judicial. The verdict had been delivered, and now, the sentencing was about to begin. I sat there, watching them. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The knot of fear that had been there for a decade was loosening. I looked at the bruise on my hand where I had gripped the chair. I was shaking. Yes, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was afraid of the truth. I looked at Brianna in the corner. She was staring at her mother with wide, horrified eyes. She had seen it. She finally knew. The spell was broken. "Now," Walter said, moving back to his desk, "let us discuss the assets, because I believe the distribution plan I drafted last month is no longer appropriate." The silence that followed the termination of the video feed was heavier than any physical weight I had ever carried. The screen had gone black, but the image of my head snapping back against the stainless steel refrigerator seemed to be burned into the retinas of everyone in the room. Arthur Pims, the senior board member, took off his glasses and began polishing them with a handkerchief, a nervous tic I had seen him do during hostile takeovers. My Aunt Sarah was staring at her hands, her face pale. Grandpa Walter did not look at the board members. He did not look at Veronica. He turned his entire body toward his son. "David," Walter said, his voice devoid of the rage that had been there minutes ago, replaced by a terrifying, clinical curiosity. "I want you to tell me what you just saw." My father swallowed hard. I could see his Adam's apple bob in his throat. He shifted in his wooden chair, the joints creaking in the quiet room. He looked at Veronica, who was staring straight ahead with glassy, shocked eyes, and then he looked at the floor. It was a heated moment. "Dad." My father stammered. His voice was thin. It was a domestic dispute. Things got out of hand. Veronica was under a lot of pressure with the party, and Elena was pushing back. It was just a family argument that went a little too far. Walter leaned forward on his cane. "2 hands. David," he said softly. 2 hands. Not a slap. Not a push. She grabbed her hair. She slammed her skull against metal. "And you call that a little too far?" It wasn't a beating. My father insisted, desperate to cling to the narrative he had sold himself. It was a scuffle. Walter closed his eyes for a second, as if in pain. Then he opened them, and they were hard as flint. You cannot even say the word, can you? Walter asked. You cannot bring yourself to say that your wife assaulted your daughter while you watched, because if you say it, you have to admit what you are, a coward. Walter turned to the rest of the room. I do not tolerate violence, he announced, his voice projecting to the back corners where the children sat. I built this family and this company on a foundation of strength, yes, but never cruelty, and I certainly do not tolerate a man who stands by and watches the weak be crushed by the strong, and then goes online to lie about it to protect his social standing. He gestured to the table. Nora. Nora Hastings adjusted her glasses and opened the thick leather folder that had been sitting in the center of the table like a loaded gun. The sound of the stiff paper turning was sharp in the silence. As you all know, Nora began, her tone shifting into a professional, rhythmic cadence that stripped the emotion out of the room and replaced it with cold, hard law. Mr. Marshall has been reviewing his estate planning and the corporate succession strategy for some time, in light of recent events, specifically the demonstrated lack of judgment and moral character by the current vice president, and the liabilities introduced by his spouse. Those plans have been finalized as of this afternoon. She pulled out a document, bound in blue paper. This is the new last will and testament of Walter Marshall, along with an updated, irrevocable trust structure for the Marshall Ridge assets, effective immediately upon signature today, Nora stated. She looked up, her eyes landing on me. The controlling interest in Marshall Ridge Holdings, comprising 51% of the voting shares, is hereby placed into a trust. The sole beneficiary and trustee of this trust is Elena Marshall. I felt the air leave my lungs. I gripped the arms of my chair. I looked at Walter. He offered me a small, barely perceptible nod. Elena? My father choked out. She's a content manager. She doesn't know how to run a construction firm. She knows the difference between right and wrong. Walter cut in, which is a skill you seem to have lost, and she will have a board of advisors to help her with the logistics. But the moral compass of the company? That belongs to her now. Nora continued, ignoring the interruption. Elena's inheritance of this position is conditional. The trust stipulates that she must maintain a corporate policy of zero tolerance for harassment and abuse. Furthermore, she is required to undergo an accelerated executive training program, which the board has already approved. Veronica made a noise, a high, strangled sound in her throat, but she didn't speak. She was waiting for her name. She was waiting to hear what was left. Nora turned the page. Regarding David Marshall, she read. My father sat up straighter, bracing himself. Mr. David Marshall is to be removed from his position as vice president of Marshall Ridge Holdings, effective immediately, Nora said. My father's face went gray. Dad? He whispered. You can't do that. I have given 30 years to this company. You gave 30 years to my shadow, Walter said coldly. And when the sun hit you, you vanished. You are done, David. Nora continued reading. In exchange for his resignation and his agreement not to contest this will, David Marshall will receive a one-time lump sum payment of $500,000. Additionally, the deed to the property known as the Creekside Cottage in Boulder will be transferred to his name. The room went silent again. $500,000. It sounded like a lot to a normal person, but to David Marshall, who lived a life of country clubs, luxury SUVs, and $10,000 Christmas parties, it was nothing. It was less than his annual salary. And the Creekside Cottage? It was a small, 2-bedroom house Walter bought years ago for fishing trips. It was nice, but it wasn't the mansion in Maple Ridge. This is a joke, my father whispered. He looked around the room, his eyes wide with panic. I have a mortgage. I have expenses. The boys. Their private school tuition alone is $40,000 a year. Then I suggest you learn to budget, Walter said, or perhaps you can find employment elsewhere, though I imagine the video of your inaction might make background checks difficult. And finally, Nora said, turning the last page, regarding Mrs. Veronica Marshall. Veronica sat up. Her face was streaked with mascara, but her eyes were sharp. She was calculating. She was expecting a payout, a separation fee, something. Mrs. Veronica Marshall is entirely excluded from the estate, Nora stated. Veronica let out a sharp breath. However, Nora said, pausing for effect, there was a provision in the previous will allocating a sum of $2 million to the current spouse of David Marshall. That provision has been struck. Where did it go? Veronica demanded, her voice shrill. That is marital property. You can't just erase it. Mr. Marshall has redirected those funds, Nora said calmly. The $2 million has been used to establish a charitable endowment. It will be known as the Clara Marshall Memorial Scholarship. I gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. Clara, my mother. Nora looked at Veronica over the rim of her glasses. It is a fund dedicated to providing full-ride scholarships to underprivileged students pursuing degrees in social work and domestic violence counseling. The irony hit the room like a physical wave. Veronica's inheritance was going to fund the very people who would fight against women like her, all in the name of the woman she had tried to replace. Walter leaned back, looking satisfied. Furthermore, Nora added, closing the file, Mr. Marshall has severed all financial ties between his personal accounts and the household accounts of David and Veronica Marshall. The joint credit lines backed by Marshall Ridge Holdings have been frozen as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. Veronica's face turned from pale to a blotchy, furious red. What does that mean? She demanded. It means, Arthur Pym said, speaking up from the other side of the circle, his voice dry and disdainful, that the company credit card you use to cater your party is no longer valid, and the line of credit you use for your real estate staging business, that was secured by Walter's assets. It is gone. Veronica stood up. The chair screeched against the hardwood floor. You can't do this, she screamed. She looked wild now. The polished socialite completely gone. This is financial abuse. You are controlling us. You are trying to ruin us because you hate me. She pointed a shaking finger at Walter. I will sue you. Do you hear me, old man? I will sue you for everything you have. I will go to the press. I will tell them you are a senile tyrant who is letting his jealous granddaughter manipulate him. I will burn your reputation to the ground. The board members looked uncomfortable, but Nora didn't flinch. She simply reached into her file and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger. You are welcome to file a lawsuit. Mrs. Marshall, Nora said. Her voice was conversational, bordering on bored. In fact, if you choose to contest the will or the trust, we would welcome the discovery process, because then, this video, and the 3 others we have of you berating your children and speaking abusively to your husband, will become public record. Veronica froze. Right now, Nora continued, this video is a private family matter, but if you sue, it becomes Exhibit A. It will be played on the news. It will be all over the internet. Imagine what that will do to your real estate license. Imagine what your clients in Maple Ridge will think when they see exactly how you treat your family. Veronica's mouth opened and closed. She looked at the USB drive. She looked at the board members, who were staring at her with judgment. She looked at David, who was holding his head in his hands. She realized, with terrifying clarity, that she had no leverage. Her power came from perception, and Walter held the kill switch for her image. She sank back into her chair. She didn't cry this time. She just looked defeated. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a structure collapsing. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I looked at the bruise on my knuckle. I looked at the faces of the people who had defined my world for so long. My father, the giant who turned out to be made of paper. Veronica, the queen who turned out to be a petty tyrant. I stood up. My legs felt steady this time. Elena, Walter said softly, you don't have to say anything. I do, I said. I looked at Veronica. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my father. He looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears. I don't want you to be homeless, Dad, I said. My voice was quiet. but it carried in the stillness. I don't want you to be poor. And I definitely don't want Brianna and Caleb to suffer because their parents are messy. I looked at the kids in the corner. Caleb was holding Brianna's hand. They looked terrified. I will make sure the kids are taken care of, I said, looking at Nora. We can work something out for their tuition. They are innocent in this. Then I looked back at Veronica. But I am done. I said, I am done being the person you kick when you are stressed. I am done being the secret you hide in the kitchen. I am done being the daughter who swallows her pride so you can play happy family. I took a deep breath. You told me I was nothing. I said to her, you told me I was just the help. Well, now I am the one signing the checks. I turned to Walter. I accept the trust, Grandpa, and I accept the conditions. Walter nodded, a look of profound pride crossing his face. Then sign the papers, he said. Nora slid the blue folder toward me. She handed me a heavy gold pen. I bent down. My hand shook as I brought the pen to the paper, but I forced it to steady. I signed my name, Elena Marshall. The ink was dark and permanent. As I straightened up, I saw my father staring at me. He looked like he was seeing me for the first time in 20 years. He looked like he wanted to say something, an apology maybe, or a plea, But I didn't wait for it. I turned my back on him and walked over to Brianna and Caleb. I knelt down in front of them. It's going to be okay, I whispered to them. I'm not going anywhere. Brianna looked at me, then at her mother, who was staring blankly at the wall. Then she leaned forward and buried her face in my shoulder. The meeting was over. The assets had been moved. The power had shifted. But as I held my sister in that room full of lawyers and money, I knew the real work, the work of rebuilding a life out of the wreckage, was just beginning. The war did not begin with a lawsuit or a scream. It began with a notification on my phone at 7 a.m. Less than 12 hours after I had walked out of my grandfather's house with the control of the company in my name. Veronica had decided that if she could not win in the boardroom, she would burn down the theater. I sat up in bed, the gray light of the 28th of December filtering through my curtains, and clicked on the link sent to me by 3 different friends. It was a video posted to Veronica's Instagram and Facebook pages. She was not wearing the sequined gold dress from the party, nor the white cashmere coat from the meeting. She was wearing a simple, oversized gray sweater. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, loose bun. She looked fragile. She looked like a victim. I pressed play. Hello, everyone, Veronica whispered into the camera, wiping a tear from her cheek. I usually keep my family life private, but I feel I have no choice but to speak up. There are rumors circulating. There are doctored images being spread by someone I loved like a daughter, someone who is hurting and is using technology to twist a family tragedy into a weapon to gain financial control. She paused, looking down at her hands, a masterclass in manufactured vulnerability. My stepdaughter, Elena, has struggled for a long time. She continued, her voice trembling. We tried to help her, but now, she has produced a video, a fake video. It cuts out the context. It uses editing tricks to make a frantic attempt to stop a drunk young woman from falling look like an assault. And she is using this to blackmail my father-in-law into cutting us out. It is elder abuse. It is extortion. And I am just so heartbroken. I watched it twice. The first time, I felt the old familiar surge of panic, the instinct to hide, to defend, to apologize. But the second time, I felt nothing but a cold, clinical appreciation for her performance. It was a lie, but it was a good one. She was pivoting. She knew the video existed, so she was trying to inoculate the public against it before it leaked. She was calling it a deep fake without using the word, relying on the public's mistrust of technology. I went to the comments section. It was a battlefield. Stay strong. Veronica, we know your heart, wrote one of her real estate clients. I heard about AI videos being used for blackmail. This is terrifying. So sorry you are going through this, wrote another. But the narrative was not holding as firmly as she hoped. There were cracks. If she was drunk, Why is she standing so still in the clip I saw? Asked a user I didn't recognize. Why would she blackmail her own grandfather? Doesn't Walter Marshall run the company? He doesn't seem like the type to be easily fooled, wrote another. Veronica was deleting the negative comments as fast as they appeared, but she couldn't catch them all. The doubt was seeping in. I called Nora Hastings. She posted, I said the moment she answered. I saw it, Nora replied. Her voice was crisp, unbothered. She is flailing. Elena, this is the death throes of her reputation. Do not engage. Do not comment. Do not post a rebuttal. She is calling me a criminal, I said, gripping the phone. She is accusing me of elder abuse. Good, Nora said. Let her dig the hole deeper. I am drafting a cease and desist letter right now, but we are going to add a little incentive. What kind of incentive? Walter gave me access to the full server logs. Nora explained. The kitchen wasn't the only room with a camera. There is audio from the living room. There is audio from the master bedroom. We have recordings of Veronica referring to you as the parasitic overhead. We have recordings of her telling Brianna that she needs to watch Elena to learn what a failure looks like. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew she despised me, but hearing that she used me as a cautionary tale for her own daughter was a new kind of cruelty. We are going to send her a private letter. Nora continued. We will tell her that if she does not remove that video and issue a retraction within 24 hours, we will release the audio files, all of them. The public might debate a grainy video, but they will not forgive a mother teaching her children to hate. By noon, the letter was sent by a courier. By 2 p.m, the local news landscape began to shift. Channel 8, a local Denver station that had been doing a series on domestic violence during the holidays, ran a segment on their midday broadcast. They didn't name names, but the description was precise enough to shatter glass. A prominent Maple Ridge family is in turmoil today after allegations of assault surfaced involving a high-profile real estate agent and a local construction magnate's family, the anchor reported. Sources say video evidence has been submitted to legal counsel showing a physical altercation on Christmas Eve. This comes amidst rumors of a major shakeup at Marshall Ridge Holdings. My phone began to ring. Unknown numbers, reporters. I let them all go to voicemail. Then, a call came from a number I recognized. The area code was local. Ms. Marshall? This is Detective Miller with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. I froze. I looked at the phone. I hadn't called the police. Ms. Marshall? I am here, I said, my voice steady. We received an anonymous tip regarding a domestic disturbance at your father's residence on the 24th, the detective said, along with a copy of a video file. We are opening an inquiry. We would like to speak with you to confirm the authenticity of the footage and to see if you wish to press charges. I closed my eyes. An anonymous tip. It had to be Walter. He was escalating. He wasn't just taking their money. He was coming for their freedom. I need to speak to my lawyer. I said, Of course, the detective said, but Ms. Marshall, if that video is real, what happened to you is a crime, third-degree assault. You do not have to protect them. I hung up and called Nora. We decided on a strategy. I would cooperate. I would submit the original file to establish the chain of custody, proving it wasn't a deepfake. I would give a statement, but I would not ask for jail time yet. I would ask for a restraining order, a protective order that would legally bar Veronica from coming near me, contacting me, or posting about me. It was the legal equivalent of a muzzle. I spent the afternoon at the station, giving my statement. Retelling the story to a stranger with a badge was exhausting. It stripped away the emotional armor I had built and left me feeling raw. When I walked out of the police station, the sun was setting, casting long, cold shadows across the parking lot. I drove to my office at Skyline Storyworks. I needed normalcy. I needed to look at a spreadsheet. I needed to remember that I was a content lead, not just a victim in a family drama. The office was mostly empty. It was the holiday dead zone between Christmas and New Year's. I parked on the third level of the garage, grabbing my laptop bag. As I walked toward the elevator, a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. I gasped, dropping my keys. The sound echoed loudly in the empty garage. It was my father. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same coat he had worn at the meeting, but he looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. "Elena," he said, his voice echoing in the concrete space. "Please, don't run." I stopped, my hand going into my pocket, gripping my phone. I tapped the screen 3 times, a shortcut I had set up years ago to open the voice memo app. I felt the vibration confirm it was recording. "What are you doing here?" "David?" I asked. I didn't call him Dad. "I needed to see you," he said, stepping closer. I held up a hand, and he stopped. "Elena, you have to stop this. You have to tell Walter to stop." "I am not controlling Walter." I said, "Walter is making his own decisions." "He is firing me." "Elena!" my father cried out, his voice cracking. "Do you understand what that means? I am 55. I can't start over. I have a mortgage. I have the club fees. I was supposed to be the CEO next year." "You should have thought about that before you watched your wife beat me," I said coldly. "It wasn't a beating," he pleaded. "She pushed you. She was stressed." "Elena, look, I know she has a temper. I know she can be difficult." "Difficult?" I repeated. She split my lip. "David," she slammed my head into a fridge. "I know," he shouted, the admission ringing off the concrete walls. "I know she hit you. I saw it, okay? I saw it. But what was I supposed to do? Hit her back? She is my wife. She is the mother of my children." I felt a rush of adrenaline. He had said it. He had admitted it on tape. "You were supposed to protect me," I said quietly. "You were supposed to be my father." "I am trying to protect the family," he insisted. "Look, if this video gets out, if the police get involved, Veronica loses her license. I lose my reputation. We lose everything. Is that what you want? Revenge?" "It is not revenge," I said. "It is consequences." "Elena, please," he said, his voice dropping to a whimper. "I am begging you. Tell Nora it was a mistake. Tell the police you fell. I will pay you. I will give you the $50,000 I have in my savings. Just make it go away." He was trying to bribe me. He was trying to buy his dignity back with money he barely had. "I don't want your money," I said, stepping back toward the elevator. "And I am not retracting anything. The police already have the video. David, it is over." His face crumbled. For a second, he looked like he might lunge at me, but then he just slumped against the pillar, a defeated man in an expensive coat. "You are ruining us," he whispered. "No," I said, pressing the elevator button. "You ruined yourselves. I just turned on the lights." The doors opened, and I stepped inside. I watched him standing there as the doors closed, a ghost of a father fading from view. I saved the recording. I named the file Admission David Marshall, M4A, and emailed it to Nora immediately. When I got to my desk, my phone buzzed again. I expected another threat, another reporter, or maybe Veronica screaming. But it was a text from Brianna. "Dear Elena." The message read, "Can I talk? Mom took my phone away, but I'm using my iPad." I sat down in my office chair, my heart aching. "I am here." "Bree," I typed. "Grandpa Walter sent me a video," she wrote, to my private email, the one from school that Mom doesn't check. My grandfather was ruthless. He had bypassed the parents entirely. "I watched it," Brianna continued. "I saw what she did to you, and I saw Dad." I stared at the screen, tears pricking my eyes. "I am so sorry you had to see that, sweetie." "Mom told us you were drunk," Brianna typed. "She told us you tried to hit her. She made us promise to tell everyone that you were the crazy one. I believed her. Elena, I am so sorry." "It is not your fault," I replied quickly. "She is your mother. You are supposed to trust her." "But she lied." Brianna wrote back. "She looked me in the eye and lied. And Dad lied too. I don't want to be in this house. It feels scary now. If she can do that to you, what if she does it to me when I get older?" That was the crack. That was the fissure that would bring the whole house down. Veronica's power relied on the absolute loyalty of her children. She needed them to be her props, her witnesses, her extensions. But Brianna was 15. She was seeing the world clearly for the first time. "You are safe," I told her. "Grandpa and I are going to make sure you are safe. Just hang tight. Do not fight with her. Just keep your head down. I love you. Elena," she wrote. "You are the only one who is real." I put the phone down and wept. Not for myself, but for the little girl who had just lost her parents. Not to death, but to the truth. An hour later, Nora called me. "We have the recording from the parking garage." Nora said, "Elena, this is gold. He admits he saw the assault. He admits he is trying to cover it up. This destroys his credibility as a witness and potentially implicates him as an accessory after the fact if we wanted to push it." "I don't care about him," I said, wiping my face. "I want the order." "We are filing tonight," Nora said. "Emergency ex parte hearing. Because of the clear evidence of violence and the witness tampering with the text messages, the judge will likely grant a temporary order immediately. The full hearing will be set for New Year's Eve." "New Year's Eve?" I asked. "It is the only slot available on the emergency docket." Nora said, "It is poetic, isn't it? You start the new year clean. What happens now?" "The sheriff will serve Veronica the papers in the morning." Nora said, "They will serve her at home, in front of the neighbors. She will be ordered to surrender any firearms, not that she has any, but it is standard, and she will be ordered to stay 500 feet away from you, and, crucially, she will be ordered to take down any social media posts mentioning you, under penalty of contempt of court." I looked out the window of my office at the Denver skyline. The city was lit up for the holidays, twinkling and bright. The next morning, the war entered its final phase. I didn't see it happen, but Walter told me later. 2 sheriff's deputies rolled up to the house in Maple Ridge at 8 in the morning. The neighbors, many of whom were walking their dogs or getting their newspapers, watched. Veronica opened the door in her robe. She thought it was a delivery. Instead, she was handed a thick stack of legal documents, the order of protection, the notice of the hearing, and a copy of the cease and desist letter regarding the defamation. She tried to argue. She tried to use her "don't you know who I am" voice, but deputies don't care about real estate awards. They told her to sign the receipt. And then, the final blow. As the deputies were leaving, a news van from Channel 8 pulled up to the curb. They weren't on the property, but they were close enough to film the police cars in the driveway. By noon, the story wasn't a blind item anymore. The headline on the local news website read, "Socialite and realtor Veronica Marshall served with restraining order following Christmas assault allegations." The article included a screenshot of her now-deleted video claiming I was drunk. It included a quote from the police report stating that video evidence of the assault has been secured. Veronica's phone began to ring. But this time, it wasn't clients looking to buy houses. It was clients looking to cancel contracts. It was the country club board asking for a leave of absence. It was the social ladder she had spent 20 years climbing, suddenly turning into a slide. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But I also felt something else. I felt clean. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. "You win. Are you happy?" I didn't reply. I deleted the thread. I blocked his number. I looked at the calendar. December 31st, the hearing. I was going to walk into that courtroom, not as the stepdaughter, not as the victim, and not as the help. I was going to walk in as the head of the Marshall family, and I was going to finish it. The courtroom on the morning of December 31st smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a sterile, wood-paneled room that felt entirely removed from the holiday season occurring outside its heavy double doors. There were no decorations here, no twinkling lights, just the cold, hard machinery of the justice system grinding into motion. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Nora. My hands were folded on the table, resting on top of a manila folder. They were not shaking. For the first time in weeks, my hands were perfectly still. Grandpa Walter sat behind me in the gallery, his cane resting against his knee. a silent sentinel in a dark wool coat. When the bailiff announced the arrival of the judge, we all stood, and then the door on the other side of the room opened. Veronica entered. If I hadn't known her for 10 years, I might have felt sorry for her. She had undergone a complete transformation. Gone were the gold sequins and the aggressive red lipstick. Gone were the 4-inch heels and the diamond earrings. She was wearing a beige cardigan that looked 2 sizes too big, a modest gray skirt, and flats. She wore no makeup, leaving her face pale and drawn. She walked with a slight stoop, clutching a tissue in her hand, looking for all the world like a fragile, misunderstood victim who had been dragged into a nightmare. My father walked a few paces behind her. He didn't look like he was acting. He looked destroyed. His skin was gray. His eyes were sunken into dark hollows, and his suit hung loosely on his frame. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Walter. He stared at the floor as if he wished it would open up and swallow him whole. Veronica's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Sterling, no relation to the guest at the party, began his opening statement with a tone of weary reasonableness. "Your Honor," he said, pacing in front of the bench, "we are here today because of a regrettable family misunderstanding that has been blown entirely out of proportion. My client, Mrs. Marshall, admits that tensions were high on Christmas Eve. However, the video evidence the plaintiff relies upon is a single, isolated fragment of a long, emotional evening. It is a moment stripped of context. Ms. Elena Marshall has a history of sensitivity. She has a tendency to exaggerate. We believe this protective order is unnecessary and punitive, designed solely to humiliate my client during a divorce negotiation." I felt a flash of anger, but Nora placed a hand on my arm. She didn't even look up from her notes. The judge, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over the rims at Mr. Sterling. "Context," the judge repeated. "Well, I suppose that is why we are here. To establish context, Ms. Hastings, you may proceed." Nora stood up. She didn't pace. She didn't use flowery language. She simply walked to the podium and connected her laptop to the courtroom's AV system. "We agree, Your Honor," Nora said coolly. "Context is everything, which is why we would like to play the full incident. Not just the physical assault, but the preamble and the aftermath." She pressed play. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom was silent. We watched the black and white footage of the pantry. We watched Veronica drag me into the room. We watched her face twist into a mask of pure rage, a stark contrast to the meek woman sitting at the defense table. We heard the insults. "You are nothing. You are just the help." We heard the physical impact of my body hitting the refrigerator. It was a loud, hollow thud that made the court reporter flinch. And then, the slap. Veronica kept her head down at the defense table, dabbing her eyes with the tissue, but the judge was not looking at Veronica. She was watching the screen with an expression of deepening distaste. Then, the video showed my father entering. It showed him standing there. It showed him closing the door to block out the noise rather than stepping in to stop the violence. Nora paused the video. "That is the visual context, Your Honor," Nora said, "but the defense claims this was a mutual altercation. They claim my client was the aggressor. To address that, we would like to submit Exhibit B, an audio recording taken 3 days after the incident, in the parking garage of the plaintiff's workplace." "Mr. Sterling jumped up. "Objection," he cried. "We have not authenticated this recording." The judge looked at him. "Is that your client's voice on the tape, counselor?" Mr. Sterling hesitated. He looked at David. David nodded weakly. "Overruled," the judge said. "Play it." Nora pressed a button. My father's voice filled the courtroom, echoing off the high ceilings. It sounded desperate and pathetic. "I know she hit you. I saw it, okay? I saw it. But what was I supposed to do? Hit her back? She is my wife." The silence in the courtroom following that admission was absolute. My father covered his face with his hands. Veronica turned to look at him, her eyes wide with betrayal. She hadn't known about the recording. She hadn't known he had confessed. Nora wasn't done. "Finally, Your Honor," Nora said, her voice softening slightly. "We have one last piece of evidence regarding the character of Mrs. Marshall and her fitness to be around this family. This is a sworn affidavit from Brianna Marshall, aged 15. Veronica's head snapped up. "No," she whispered, "not Brianna." Nora began to read. "My name is Brianna Marshall. On the night of December 24th, I was in the hallway outside the kitchen. I heard my mother screaming. I heard a loud crash, like a body hitting something metal. I was scared, so I didn't go in. Later, my mother came out. She told me and my brother Caleb that Elena was drunk and had fallen down. She told me that if anyone asked, I had to say Elena was acting crazy. She made me practice saying it, but I knew it was a lie because I heard what happened. Elena wasn't drunk. My mother was hurting her." Nora lowered the paper. "This is not just an assault on an adult, Your Honor," Nora said. "This is a systematic attempt to weaponize children against their sibling. It is manipulation, it is psychological abuse, and it is dangerous." The judge took off her glasses. She looked at Veronica. The judicial detachment was gone, replaced by the steely glare of a woman who had heard enough. "Mrs. Marshall," the judge said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the entire state of Colorado. Veronica stood up, trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." "I have sat on this bench for 12 years, the judge said. "I have heard many excuses for violence. I have heard stress and misunderstanding and context more times than I can count. But I rarely see such a calculated attempt to destroy a victim's reputation after physically assaulting them." The judge looked down at her paperwork. "I am finding that you committed an act of domestic violence against Elena Marshall. I am granting the permanent protective order. You are to stay 500 feet away from the plaintiff at all times. You are not to contact her by phone, email, text, or third party." The judge paused, then leaned forward. "Furthermore, regarding your social media activity, you are hereby ordered to remove any and all posts referencing the plaintiff immediately. You are prohibited from posting about her, or this incident, on any public forum. If I hear that you have made even a vague reference to her online, I will hold you in contempt of court, and you will go to jail. Do you understand me?" "I understand," Veronica whispered. "And regarding Mr. Marshall," the judge added, looking at my father, "while you are not the respondent in this protection order, your admission on that tape is appalling. You stood by and watched. Shame on you." She banged the gavel. The sound was like a gunshot ending the war. "Court is adjourned." The room erupted into movement. Nora turned to me and squeezed my hand. "We did it," she said softly. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 19 years old. We walked out into the hallway. The wide corridor was lined with benches and filled with lawyers rushing to other cases. As we reached the elevators, Veronica and David emerged from the courtroom. Veronica was no longer playing the victim. The moment the doors swung shut behind her, the stoop in her shoulders vanished, replaced by the rigid tension of a wire about to snap. She turned on my father right there in the middle of the hallway. "You idiot," she hissed, not caring who heard. "You recorded it? You let her record you?" "Veronica, please," David begged, reaching for her arm. "I was trying to fix it. I was trying to get her to drop it." "You ruined me," she screamed, shoving his hand away. "You stood there in front of the judge and let them play that tape. You didn't protect me. You never protect me. You are a weak, pathetic man." A crowd was starting to form. Lawyers were stopping to watch. "David, she is right." The voice belonged to Walter. He had stepped out of the courtroom behind us. He stood tall, leaning on his cane, looking at his son with eyes that were no longer angry, just incredibly sad. "Dad," David said, his voice breaking. I lost the job. I lost the house." "You made your choice," Walter said. He looked at Veronica, who was glaring at him with pure hatred, and then back to David. "You have a choice right now. David," Walter said, "you can continue to stand there and be berated by the woman who beat your daughter. You can continue to apologize for her, or you can accept responsibility for your own cowardice and start the very long, very hard work of becoming a man again. David looked at Veronica. She was vibrating with rage, her face twisted and ugly. Then he looked at me. I stood next to Walter. I didn't look away. I didn't offer him a smile. I didn't offer him forgiveness. I just stood there, waiting to see if he was capable of saving himself. David looked down at his shoes. He took a half step toward me, then stopped. He couldn't do it. The shame was too heavy. He retreated, taking a step back toward the wall, shrinking away from all of us. I turned my back on him. "Come on, Grandpa," I said. "Let's go." We walked toward the exit. As we pushed through the glass doors and into the crisp, cold air of the parking lot, I heard running footsteps behind us. "Elena." I turned around. It was Brianna. She had been waiting in the lobby with Caleb and a court advocate. She was running across the pavement, her coat unbuttoned, her hair flying. She didn't stop until she collided with me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and buried her face in my coat. She was sobbing. I held her tight. I felt her shaking against me. I looked over her head and saw Caleb standing by the door, looking unsure. I waved him over. He ran to us and joined the hug, burying his face in my side. "I got you," I whispered to them. "I got you." For the first time in my life, I walked away from the Marshall family drama not as the victim, but as the shelter. 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon that threatened snow, I stood in the driveway of the house in Maple Ridge. It was a strange scene. 2 massive moving trucks were parked on the street. Men in uniforms were carrying furniture out the front door. The mahogany dining table where I had been ignored for years. The leather sofas where Veronica had held court. The antique armoire from the hallway. They were all pieces that belonged to the Walter Marshall Trust. Legally, they were company assets that had been loaned to the vice president's residence. And now, the trust was recalling its loans. Veronica was inside, somewhere. I didn't see her. I didn't need to. The protective order meant she couldn't come out while I was there, and the movers were supervised by sheriff's deputies to ensure peace. I stood on the lawn with Walter. Brianna and Caleb were playing with Walter's golden retriever, Buster, near the truck. They were laughing. It was a sound I hadn't heard in this yard for a long time. Walter watched the movers load the dining table onto the ramp. "You know," he said quietly, digging his hands into his coat pockets, "I didn't call that meeting just to punish them." I looked at him. "Then why did you do it?" Walter turned to look at me. The wind ruffled his gray hair. "I called the meeting so everyone could see you were beaten," he said. "That was the hard part. But what I really wanted was for everyone to see how you stood up afterward." I looked at the house. It looked smaller now. Without the perfectly staged furniture, without the terrifying presence of Veronica filling every room. It was just a building of brick and glass. It wasn't a prison anymore. I took a deep breath of the cold mountain air. It tasted like pine and snow. It tasted like the future. "You were right, Grandpa," I said. "Saying no is the most powerful word in the language." Walter smiled. He put his arm around my shoulder and squeezed. "Come on, kid," he said. "Let's go get some hot chocolate. I think the kids are cold." I nodded. I called out to Brianna and Caleb. They came running, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. We walked toward Walter's car together, leaving the empty house behind us. I didn't look back. For the first time, Christmas wasn't a memory of what I had endured. It was the anniversary of the day I found my voice, and as I climbed into the car, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would never, ever be silent again. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lila Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while cooking dinner in London, driving to work in New York, or relaxing in Sydney? Please leave a comment below with your location, and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed seeing Elena reclaim her power, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who might need to hear it.